Chapter 192. Oh. When he opened his eyes again, Yin Nuoshing let out a painful groan. The first thing that entered his eyes was a snow-white ceiling. It seemed like he was in a room. The room was filled with a faint fragrance of incense that made his mind calm down. Stepping onto the soft bed, Yin Nuoshing looked around the exquisitely decorated room in a daze. The glaring sunlight shone on his pale face from the side, causing him to frown and turn his head. The bright sunlight shone through the open window at the side. Outside the window, the snow-white clouds were retreating rapidly. Ouch, 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 ouch. Yin Nuoshing looked at the strong sunlight with a pained expression. He struggled to sit up, and his snow-white hair was pulled up from the bed. His light purple hair had already lost its gorgeous color. He held his head with one hand. His mind and body were in intense pain, as if they were being torn apart. There were also waves of pain coming from the inside of his body. He knew that this was a sign of serious injury. He lowered his head to look at his clothes. The black windbreaker and black robe that he always wore were gone. In their place was a gray linen shirt. A few bandages could be seen around his chest, and there were mottled bloodstains on the bandages. Yin Nuoshing touched the bandages around his chest in a daze, only to realize that there were many bandages around his arms that were stained with bloodstains. He blinked his eyes hard. He remembered that when he charged into the silver crack, he didn't leave from the same place as he had imagined. Instead, he fell into the void and was ravaged by the spatial turbulence everywhere. In order to protect the few of them, he seemed to have broken his 6 wings. In the end, Yishi had to wave her Ling Hong sword twice to escape from the void. If it weren't for the purple night flame and the various divine weapons, the 5 of them might have been torn apart by the chaotic spatial energy. Ming, the Hun, Xiaoxi, Sister Yuan. Yin Nuoshing was stunned for a moment, but he quickly reacted and hurriedly called out. He only remembered that Yishi had cut open the void, but he didn't remember what happened after that. He didn't see the others now. Where did they go? Had they come out yet? His gaze swept over the strand of hair in his hand, and he was stunned for a moment. His eyes quickly turned to the bed beside him, and he saw Ming, who had beautiful purplish-black hair, sleeping soundly. Her breathing was calm, and her small face was calm, as if nothing had happened. Ming! Yin Nuoshing heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that she was sleeping soundly with no injuries on her body. However, she didn't see the other 3 figures when she scanned the room. There's no need to look for them. Those 2 were thrown off when they were about to leave the void. If you didn't catch them, Yishi will be in trouble. Just as Yin Nuoshing was feeling anxious because she didn't see the 2 of them, Ziye's voice slowly rang out in her mind. Moreover, that faintly discernible voice seemed to be a little weak. Ziyu, what happened to you? Yin Nuoshing was stunned when she heard the weakness in Ziye's voice. She quickly asked, and then laughed bitterly. This damned spatial tunnel. She only took 1 trip, and she was injured all over. She definitely wouldn't use it again in the future. I'm fine. Our minds are connected. You're weak, so I'm a little weak too. Ziyi sighed faintly and said, when you left the void and fell from the sky, you were rescued by a spaceship. You're on the ship now. You've been unconscious for 7 days. I want to help you heal your injuries, but I don't have enough energy, so there's nothing I can do. A flying ship? Yin Nuoshing looked at the white clouds floating outside the window when she heard that. Flying ships, as the name implied, flew in the sky. It was a unique means of transportation in the divine continent. The original design idea was that rare and exotic beasts were hard to find, and those who needed to travel long distances needed a means of transportation to save themselves from exhaustion. Therefore, flying ships were created. High-grade flying ships could even exceed the speed of light at the highest speed. However, looking at the scenery outside the window, it didn't seem to be flying at its highest speed. It was flying leisurely. Ming. Yin Nuoshing gently caressed Ming's face and called out softly. However, the latter wrinkled his little nose, turned around, and continued to sleep. He had no intention of waking up at all. Where's Yishi? You said that she's a little troublesome. Troublesome means she suddenly thought of what Z had just said, and her heart, which had not yet calmed down, suddenly jumped up a lot. A faint sigh suddenly sounded in her heart. causing Yun Nuoxing's heart to sink. Don't worry, Yishi also came out. However, she used the Linghong sword in order to break through the void and suffered a backlash. Ziyi hurriedly said when he sensed the sorrow in her heart. Hearing that, Yun Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief. It was just a backlash caused by the Linghong sword. She would be fine after some recuperation. Yishi also cultivated the soul-burning technique, so some damage to her soul would not be very serious. She's not the owner of the divine weapon, nor did she borrow the power of the owner of the divine weapon. She used the divine weapon on her own accord. Do you think the backlash from that broken Linghong sword will be any better? Ziyi said indifferently, just as Yun Nuoxing was feeling a little relieved. What do you mean? Yun Nuoxing hurriedly asked when she heard that something was wrong. A divine weapon is different from a divine weapon. Once it recognizes its owner, it can still be lent to others. Once a divine weapon recognizes its owner, it will be difficult for it to unleash its power unless the owner is dead. Even if the owner forcibly uses the power of the divine weapon, they will also suffer a terrifying backlash. If it's lent to others, that person's energy will also be needed as a guide. Ziyi sighed. There's my energy in the Linghong sword. How? Yun Nuoxing was a little anxious when she heard that. When she passed the Linghong sword to Yishi, she did have her own energy in it. However, your energy was depleted after the first swing. When you fell into the void, the second and third swings were her own energy. I don't think I need to say much about the consequences. You'll know once you enter your soul, Ziyi said with a sigh. Soul? Hearing that, Yun Nuoxing did not ask any more questions. She hurriedly lay down and entered her soul. After entering her soul, Yun Nuoxing was shocked. The originally pitch-black soul space was now filled with a sea of fire. The light purple fire lit up the space, but did not make her feel hot at all. She only felt a little warm. Ignoring the changes in her soul space, Yun Nuoxing hurriedly raised her head and saw the silver god's imprint. Behind the imprint, there was a beautiful egg that was half pink and half black. It was quietly floating there. Beside it, there was a cocoon of light that was about 10 feet in size that attracted her attention. This is... Yun Nuoxing frowned. He was 100% sure that there was no such thing in his soul before. The cocoon formed by Yishi's soul. A pleasant but weak voice came from beside him. Yun Nuoxing turned her head and saw Ziyi slowly walking over from the sea of fire in the distance. Her purple robes covered her delicate body and made her look slender. However, her beautiful face was a little pale. After stealing a few glances, Yun Nuoxing hurriedly turned her head and muttered with uncertainty. Formed by Yishi? Fortunately, you let her cultivate the burning soul technique. Her soul was severely injured, and she turned into a cocoon. This is the final defense of the burning soul technique. The backlash from the divine weapon is not as simple as you think. If not for the burning soul technique, her soul would have been destroyed. Yun Nuoxing was silent for a while. After a while, she sighed heavily and looked at Ziyi. She said, when will little she wake up? I don't know. When her soul recovers. When will she wake up? Ziyi shook her head and looked at the silver god's imprint. She then comforted, don't worry. With the god's imprint and the burning soul technique, nothing will happen to Yishi. If you're worried, you should recover quickly and use your spiritual energy to nourish this cocoon. Who knows, she might recover faster. Seeing her smile softly, Yun Nuoxing also squeezed out a forced smile. He gently patted the cocoon and let out a long sigh. Opening her eyes, Yun Nuoxing sat up and scratched her head. She touched the 2 rings and 2 pendants that were still there and let out a sigh of relief. She took out a black windbreaker and casually put it on. Then, she took out 2 elixirs for internal injuries and popped them into her mouth. With the 5 elements in her body and the purple night flame, it was only a matter of time before she recovered. She sat cross-legged on the bed and took out an 8-colored crystal the size of a fingernail. Her spiritual energy drilled out from between her eyebrows and formed a crude heaven-refining array around Yun Nuoxing. Because it was only used to condense energy, there was no need to draw it out completely. The effect was greater than simply activating an energy condensing array. She threw the crystal into the center of the array, and the array began to operate gently. A thick energy mist floated in the array space and poured into Yun Nuoxing's body continuously, repairing her body that had reached its limit. The 5 elements in her body carried 2 flames as they traveled through her body. Along the way, they repaired some broken meridians. The external injuries on the surface of her body were also healing at an observable speed. In less than an hour, the array dissipated and the energy of the crystal in the center of the array was completely absorbed by Yun Nuoxing. It turned into ashes and drifted in the air. Phew! The array dissipated and Yun Nuoxing let out a long sigh of relief. The paleness on her handsome face had already been replaced by a rosy complexion. Her silver-white hair had also returned to its light purple color. Her entire body was filled with energy, and her injuries had already healed. The 5 elements and the divine flame allowed her to recover at an extremely fast speed. The effect was definitely not inferior to some high-grade elixirs. However, Yun Nuoxing was still not used to being injured. Every time she healed, she would feel an unforgettable pain. She had the light element in her body, so not everything could hurt her. She stretched her waist and removed all the bandages on her body. Her line of sight inadvertently glanced at her 2 arms. Then, she was stunned. On her 2 arms, there was a mysterious pattern that was connected from end to end. It extended from her shoulders all the way to her forearms. 9 different colors of light flowed slowly and seemed to connect everything together. On her right forearm, the pattern of the Netherworld Ruin Sword and Ling Hong Sword that originally existed had already disappeared. It had transformed into a large, colorful imprint that almost covered her entire forearm. She could even vaguely see the 2 divine weapons. There was even a tiny, colorful line that extended all the way to her middle finger. This, what the hell is this? Yun Nuoxing widened her eyes and stared fixedly at that line. Her voice was a little shocked as she shouted at the top of her lungs. This is the imprint left behind by the divine weapons that you took out and merged into your body. It has been integrated into your body by your physique. Don't be so shocked. This is the imprint left behind by the cultivation method of the spiritual divine physique. It is constantly accommodating, and from the looks of it, there seems to be some progress. It is said that the complete spiritual divine physique will be covered in colorful patterns. Moreover, the best, or rather, the most common cultivation method of the spiritual divine physique is to accommodate a bunch of spiritual high-level weapons. Your entire body is like a moving arsenal. Hearing her frightened shout, Z explained nonchalantly. As Yun Nuoxing recovered, her voice was no longer weak. It was still that kind of clear voice that was like a wind chime that warmed one's heart. Yun Nuoxing was dumbfounded. She didn't know what to say at all. Could it be that those divine weapons had entered her body so casually, without her consent? Was the divine physique too domineering, or were the divine weapons too casual? But it looks pretty good. Yun Nuoxing shook her head with a smile as she turned her arm around to admire it. Shameless. Z couldn't help but mutter when he heard Yun Nuoxing's narcissistic voice. You're very beautiful too, okay? Yun Nuoxing pursed her lips and looked at the light purple flame imprint on her chest. It was now like a seed that had sprouted a tender shoot. However, it was growing on 2 ends, one up and the other down. Of course. In the end, Z laughed proudly in Yun Nuoxing's heart. Like a wind chime, it made a pleasant tinkling sound. Yun Nuoxing, he glanced at Ming and hesitated for a moment before carrying her. In this unfamiliar place, Yun Nuoxing couldn't feel at ease leaving her here alone. After tidying up the bed, Yun Nuoxing carried Ming to the door, gently pushed it open, and walked out. Yun Nuoxing secretly peeked half his head out. He didn't see dozens of people forming hand seals as soon as the door opened as he expected. He slowly relaxed. Then he laughed bitterly. Why are you so nervous? There was a curved corridor outside the room. There were many other rooms and other places. It seemed to be an area similar to a residential area. He looked at the 2 passageways on his left and right. then lifted his feet and walked toward the left. His footsteps made clanging sounds as he stepped on the floor that seemed to be made of metal. After walking for about 5 minutes, Yun Nuashing saw an exit. Sunlight shone in from the entrance. When he saw this, his footsteps quickened, and his primary energy began to circulate crazily again. When he walked out of the door, the dazzling sunlight shone down from the sky and landed on Yun Nuashing's body without any obstructions. He closed his eyes out of habit. After a while, he finally adapted to the intensity of the sunlight and slowly opened his eyes. He looked around and lowered his gaze a little. He couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Wow! What entered his line of sight was a wide and spacious platform. It was like a flat and smooth metal plate that extended out. It was at least 1,000 meters long and a few hundred meters wide. The entire platform was made of a white flat plate, and the front of the deck formed an arc that looked like a white longsword. There were vertical baffles at the edge. At this moment, many people were lying on the baffles, talking and laughing. From Yun Nuashing's angle, he could see everything below. Yun Nuashing was also on a small platform. There were stairs on both sides that surrounded a building that looked like an iron tower behind him. It was also made of white metal. There was still a long way to go, but no one walked to the back. Most of them were gathered on the deck in front of the ship. It's so big, Yun Nuashing couldn't help but exclaim. The entire ship was more than 2,000 meters long. It was like a small moving fortress, but it didn't look strict. There weren't many guards holding spears. It looked happy and harmonious, and the surrounding atmosphere was very relaxed and cheerful. This ship is heading towards the northeast, Qin Wentian said. Yun Nuashing looked up at the sun hanging high in the sky and murmured, I don't know where I am now. Have I reached the so-called Xingyu city? Where are my sister and the others? While Yun Nuashing was murmuring, someone finally noticed him. There were some noises on the deck, and many people quickly walked towards him. Hearing the cries of some people, Yun Nuashing also retracted his gaze and jumped down from the 100-meter high platform first. Then, amidst the surprised cries of the crowd, he landed lightly and stopped in front of the crowd. He smiled and cupped his hands. Thank you for saving us. Everyone looked at him strangely, then smiled. A middle-aged man wearing a purple robe walked out of the crowd and sized him up. Then, he smiled and said, Not bad, little brother. Your injuries have healed so quickly. You can jump now. Hearing this, Yun Nuashing smiled bitterly and shook his head. It had already been 7 days. How could it be fast? However, if this thought was known by others, they might not be able to help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Such a serious injury was healed in 7 days. What was there to be dissatisfied about? Did he eat a huge amount of pills? Hee. We're the fleet of the Xian family in Xingyu City. When we passed by here, we saw you falling from the sky, so we gave you a hand. If you fell straight down like this, I'm afraid you would be smashed into meat paste. Thank you for saving us. Yun Nuashing smiled, cupped his hands, and said, However, some thoughts were swirling in his mind. Xian family? It can't be that Xian family, right? Thinking until here, he shook his head. In this world, the realm of the gods was so vast. There were at least tens of thousands of families with the surname Xian. It might not be the same family. Xingyu City, it should be the Xingyu City that person mentioned. I didn't expect that after breaking free from the spatial tunnel, it didn't deviate too much. My name is Xian Fu. I'm a deacon of the Xian family. This time, I'm leading the Xian family's fleet to do business. Now, I'm on the way back. After saving you, I didn't help much. There are no doctors or alchemists on the fleet. I could only help you treat your injuries. The middle-aged man named Xian Fu scratched his head and smiled. Thank you, big brother Xian Fu. I'm Yun Nuashing. Yun Nuashing smiled and thanked him again. Then he said, I wonder if big brother Xian Fu saw the red-clothed girl who fell down with me. No. At that time, there were only the two of you in the sky. No one else was there. Hearing that, Xian Fu immediately shook his head. At that time, it was daytime. There were no clouds in the sky. It was impossible to miss anything. Hearing this answer, even though Yun Nuashing was prepared, he couldn't help but sigh. Sister Yuan, little Z, where did you go? Chapter 193. Little brother, are you all right? Are your injuries still not healed? Xian Fu couldn't help but ask when he saw Yun Nuoxing's sad expression. I'm fine. Yun Nuoxing shook his head and looked up at the sky. He let out a long sigh and hesitated for a while before asking, where did I fall from that day? Little brother, 7 days have already passed. No matter what you want to find, there won't be anything left behind. Why don't you tell us what happened first and see if we can help? Xian Fu said calmly as he patted his shoulder. Hearing that, Yun Nuoxing nodded his head. He took a deep breath and slowly explained what happened. You actually escaped from the spatial tunnel? Xian Fu's face was filled with shock. He couldn't help but shake his head and say, no wonder your injuries are so serious. The backlash of spatial energy isn't that good. You're lucky to be able to escape from that thing. Once, when a fleet of our Xian family used the tunnel, they also disappeared without a trace. We don't know where they went. Let's go back to Star University first. Since you're heading in that direction, maybe your friend has already been teleported there. Xian Fu smiled and comforted Yun Nuoxing as he patted his shoulder. I hope so. Yun Nuoxing nodded his head. His heart slowly calmed down. Right now, this was the only way. He wasn't familiar with this place. If he rushed out rashly, he might not be able to find his way. Since Xian Fu came from Star University, then he could follow him to Star University. Seeing that he agreed, Xian Fu said, the fleet will probably reach Star University in half a month. During this time, stay on the ship. You can stroll around as you wish. But remember, don't go to the building in the center. Nodding his head again, Yun Nuoxing smiled. He didn't think about strolling around. Right now, he didn't have the mood. Moreover, he was about to reach his destination. He wanted to break through to the immortal realm before he landed. If Star University was the center of Taiyuan region, then the divine continent was the center of the god realm. This was the gathering place of many experts. All the major forces were rooted here. Thousands of races stood in great numbers. Walking in this place, if one's strength wasn't enough, there would be some trouble. Although Yun Nuoxing's trump card was enough to let him run amok in the divine continent, his strength was still a little weak. It said that as long as one's strength was strong enough, you're strong. But no matter who saw a person who was full of divine tools, they would feel a little uncomfortable. In the end, one's own strength was the most important thing. Thinking of this, Yun Nuoxing smiled. He greeted Xian Fu and said something. Then, he jumped onto the platform and went back to his room. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath. His soul power gushed out from between his eyebrows. Along with the purple night flame, he condensed a layer of soul barrier in the room. As long as the soul power didn't exceed his, they wouldn't be able to perceive everything that happened here. Carefully putting Ming on the bed and covering him with a quilt, he formed a few hand seals with both hands and constructed the heaven refining great formation. His finger lightly touched the pendant. He couldn't help but frown. With a flash of light, a head-sized fire pearl and a fist-sized Saint-grade mysterious crystal floated in front of him. Looking at the familiar fire pearl, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but smile bitterly. He found it at the place where he found the phoenix egg. It contained a lot of pure fire element energy. Originally, he gave it to Yu Yin. Looking at it now, she seemed to have given it to him when he wasn't paying attention. His palm gently caressed the fire bead, and the scorching energy flowed into his body through his palm. The fire element in his body let out an incomparably excited and yearning sound. Feeling this energy, Yun Nuoxing missed his heartless sister who always treated him like a child, even though they had only been separated for less than half a month. I always feel it's very quiet. Letting out a long sigh, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but murmur. Half a month ago, there were still a few people beside him, chattering nonstop. It made him forget the faintly discernible feeling of vicissitudes of life. But now, Yu Yin and Little Purple Soul were gone. Yishi's soul was badly injured and dormant. Little Ming was also in a coma. He was left alone in a daze. The palm that was grinding the fire bead paused. On the smooth bead, Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. He turned the fire bead over, only to discover that there were a few words carved on it. He looked at it with interest, and then his face instantly twitched violently. If you don't refine the fire pearl, I will pluck you down from the sky. Yin Nuashing shook his head with a bitter smile. This was what she wanted to do. She wanted to pluck him down from the sky all day long. But he had always been curious. What did pluck him down from the sky mean? Fine, I'll refine it. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Yin Nuashing muttered helplessly. This fire pearl contained a very rich fire element energy. The fire element in his body had reached the purest stage because he had refined the purple night flame. If he refined it now, the effect will be maximized. It wouldn't be a problem for him to break through to the half-immortal stage. The problem was whether he could break through to the immortal stage. Z, you said that there won't be any repercussions for me to break through to the half-immortal stage by refining the glazed crystal, right? Yin Nuashing couldn't help but ask while he was thinking. That's right. The spiritual godly physique is universal. Other physiques that also rely on energy can also use this method. Z nodded when he heard Yin Nuashing's voice. Then he added, also, there's no need to doubt anything. If I say you have the spiritual godly physique, then you have the spiritual godly physique. In the current realm of the gods, only some super old monsters know about this physique. Others might not be able to recognize it. Yin Nuashing rubbed his face with a bitter smile. He had been living a strange life for the past few years. He didn't even know who he was. The mortal stage is the half-immortal stage. There are 9 transformations in the half-immortal stage. You have to compress your energy 9 times before you can break through to the immortal stage. Yin Nuashing collected her thoughts and calculated in her mind. Then, she frowned and looked at the fire pearl floating in front of her. She said, "What about this fire pearl? Can I use it too?" Yes. As long as it's pure energy, it's fine. This fire pearl is condensed from the energy leaked out from the saint-grade mysterious crystal. The energy of the fire element is more than that of the saint-grade mysterious crystal. In other words, refining this fire pearl will be more beneficial to you. Z yawned and answered lazily. Taking a deep breath, Yin Nuashing threw away the distracting thoughts in her mind. Then, she slapped the fire pearl into the eye of the heaven refining formation. She changed her hand seal, and dozens of energy matrices gushed out and wrapped around the fire pearl. They extracted rich fire element energy and then transmitted it to every part of the formation through the energy matrices. The entire formation was dyed a fiery red. The blazing energy seeped out and spun in the air, automatically absorbing the surrounding fire element energy. Then, entered Yin Nuashing's body. It passed through the purple night flame that enveloped her body and refined it. Then it was refined by the soul-burning technique in her body. The energy that was as thick as a thigh suddenly became as thin as a pinky finger. Finally, it turned into surging origin energy and spread throughout the crystals in her limbs and bones. Compress the energy harder. You have to compress it to the same degree as the energy in your body, Ziyi said calmly. Yin Nuashing nodded solemnly. The origin energy container in her lower abdomen had already been condensed into a crystal. The energy that was released was also energy that had been compressed to the extreme. The new energy also had to be compressed and refined layer by layer until it reached the same state before it could be absorbed. As a result, the amount of energy required was an astronomical figure. The energy flowing in the crystal had been compressed countless times before it obtained such a color. It was red from the fire element, blue from the water element, and golden from the light element. However, Yin Nuashing wasn't worried about the lack of energy at all. Not to mention that the heaven refining formation could absorb the energy of heaven and earth within a certain range. Just the energy contained in the fire pearl was enough to support Yin Nuashing's cultivation. The half-immortal stage requires the origin energy in the body to gradually transform into immortal qi. Only when all of the origin energy is replaced by immortal qi can one be considered to have advanced into the immortal stage. 2 different types of energy, but formed from the same source of energy. But to what extent do I have to compress it? Not long after, the entire formation was covered by a dense, fiery red energy mist. Yin Nuashing's figure was also submerged in the mist. A whirlpool could be seen spinning rapidly in the formation, condensing the surrounding energy mist into liquid. Like streams of water, the liquid quickly flowed towards the source of the whirlpool, yin nuashing. The liquid entered through every pore of her body and was refined into pure origin energy, which gathered in her lower abdomen. The energy gathered in her lower abdomen wasn't in a hurry to fuse with the crystal. On the contrary, more energy continuously flowed out of the crystal and intertwined with the new energy. Then, it was compressed and condensed by her majestic soul energy. Under the powerful compression, the two types of energy emitted waves of energy. The volume of the two types of energy also became smaller and smaller, as if they were about to become solid. Drain the energy in the container and temper it. Then, put the newly compressed energy, immortal qi, into the container. Ziyu is also guiding Yin Nuashing's cultivation from the side. The heaven and earth energies from the outside world were also mixed with the numerous elemental energies that were drifting about and were pouring into the formation. However, when they just approached the hull of the ship, these energies without exception disappeared without a trace. Only in the boundary world could these energies be observed. One after another, the energies converged into a huge energy light beam that broke into the formation that enveloped the entire room. Ordinary energy of heaven and earth entering the formation was nothing. However, when the elemental energies entered the formation, the mottled colors were uniformly transformed into fiery red fire elemental energies. Then, they emerged from the formation and were refined by Yun Nuashing. Under such an orderly situation, the energy in Yun Nuashing's body was slowly increasing. The crystal in her lower abdomen was also slowly growing bigger. Moreover, it seemed to be gradually becoming rounder. The 8 corners of the cube were actually slowly being worn away. When the crystal turned into a perfectly round bead, she reckoned that she would be able to advance to the immortal rank. A ball, huh? Interesting measurement method. Yin Nuashing, who sensed the changes, laughed. The measurement of the levels in the ranks wasn't very clear. Unless she went through it step by step, or she could see it when she released her aura, she wouldn't be able to sense it. However, the changes in the ranks were observable to a certain extent. Every time she advanced to the next rank, the energy contained in her body would change. Apart from this, she could also see the changes in the container. After carefully sizing it up and seeing that there was nothing wrong with it, Yin Nuashing slowly closed her eyes and continued to absorb the huge amount of energy. It would take some time for her to advance from the 11th level of the mortal rank to the half-immortal rank, then to the immortal rank, even if she used the 5 elements to increase her speed. She had to try her best to finish it within half a month. After cultivating in such an orderly manner for a few days, Yin Nuashing unexpectedly discovered that the head-size fire bead hadn't changed at all. It was still the same size, and it was still very bright. It was as if it wasn't the one supplying the energy all this time. However, the energy flowing out of the formation was indeed extracted from it. After being surprised for a while, Yin Nuashing turned her attention to her lower abdomen. There, a bright-colored bead was surrounded by a fiery red pool of energy. The bead was constantly extracting the energy from the pool to strengthen itself. Within the fiery red energy, there was a bit of illusory energy that was completely different from the energy from before. However, with Yin Nuashing's refining speed, this was still too slow. The energy wasn't abundant enough, and as she refined it, it broke off. The speed at which the 5 elements are added together is too fast. With a thought, a vast amount of soul power wrapped around the pool of water. The majestic strength compressed the pool of water, turning it into a whirlpool and pushing it into the round bead. Looking at the energy that was quickly condensing at the side, Yin Nuashing's side. Although the energy that was stripped from a fire bead was already very large, the energy was still not enough. Yin Nuashing glanced to the side and saw the black rhombus crystal that was constantly emitting a faint purple energy. Yin Nuashing's eyes turned, but before he could do anything, the seal on the surface of the rhombus crystal actually cracked a little. Instantly, The energy that was several times larger than before rushed towards the rapidly condensing energy like an ocean. The vast soul power was actually shaken by the sudden appearance of this energy. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. After a moment, she reacted and shrugged her shoulders. She thanked Ziyi in her heart. He knew that this was Ziyi's masterpiece. At this moment, the faint purple energy and the fiery red energy intertwined and rapidly condensed beside the bead. The massive energy was also growing larger and larger. He couldn't divert his attention to other things. He hurriedly released all of his soul power, carrying the 5 elements, and threw it into the refinement process. The vast amount of energy that was as vast as the ocean howled in his body. It even formed an energy storm that swept through the entire room. The storm lasted for a moment. Suddenly, dozens of silk threads extended from Yin Nuoxing's skin and stuck to every corner of the room. Dazzling light was released. More and more silk threads surged out and wrapped around Yin Nuoxing and the heaven refining array. Silk threads kept entangling them and slowly formed a cocoon. Flickering lights flickered in the cocoon like a heartbeat. With the formation of the cocoon, the energy storm also disappeared. The entire room was left with a huge cocoon of light and Ming, who was sleeping soundly. Chapter 194. The snow-white room was filled with bright, mottled energy, forming a small whirlpool. Energy whistled and surged, and through the layers of dense energy mist, one could see a large cocoon of light hanging in the middle of the room. The dazzling light flickered like a beating heart. Every time the light flickered, the surrounding energy would fluctuate, and then a large portion of the energy would flow into the cocoon of light. During the time that Yin Nuoxing was in seclusion, Xian Fu and the others only came by once. However, they only stood at the door for a moment. When they felt the powerful energy reverberating through the door, even though he was an immortal rank expert, he couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Thus, he stopped everyone from investigating. The most taboo thing for cultivators was to be disturbed. If they were disturbed, their state of mind would become unstable, and their efforts would be for naught. But if the energy went berserk, when he thought of this, Xian Fu couldn't help but wipe his forehead. If the energy in the room went berserk, it would be enough to blow up the entire ship, since no one came to disturb them. Yin Nuoxing's advancement naturally progressed smoothly. The energy in the room gradually retracted and was locked in the room by the formation under the cocoon of light. Everything flowed back into the room, and the cocoon of light was immersed in a sea of energy. If anyone could see the cocoon of light, they would discover that it was nurturing an extremely powerful life form. During this time, Ming woke up. She was shocked when she saw the cocoon of light hanging in the air. However, when she sensed Yin Nuoxing's presence, she calmed down. She had seen Yin Nuoxing transform into a cocoon before, so there was nothing to be surprised about. However, when she swept her small eyes around and didn't see Yin, Yi Shi, or Little Purple Soul, she was a little anxious. This was the first time she had been left alone like this. It felt as if she had been abandoned. She felt so wrong that she wanted to cry. A thin layer of mist actually appeared in her watery eyes. As if sensing Ming's emotions, the cocoon of light suddenly became much brighter. A powerful suction force suddenly erupted from the cocoon of light, crazily plundering the energy in this area. It even formed a huge energy whirlpool in the room. At this time, there was no barrier set up by a divine artifact in the room, and the soul barrier had inadvertently dispersed when Yin Nuoxing transformed into a cocoon. This caused the whirlpool to clearly expand, forming a multicolored energy whirlpool outside the ship. A strange pressure spread out, causing the hearts of the people on the deck to abruptly contract. What a powerful pressure! This energy seems to be almost at the immortal rank. On the deck, Xian Fu couldn't help but gulp when he saw the energy whirlpool formed halfway up the building. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead and back. Only a few people in the Xian family possessed such a powerful pressure. Everyone, do not take half a step into the residential area. Stay on the deck for this period of time. After pausing for a moment, Xian Fu quickly reacted and shouted loudly. His voice spread out majestically. A 16 or 17-year-old immortal rank expert. Thinking of Yin Nuoxing's young appearance, Xian Fu couldn't help but smile bitterly. If the former really broke through to the immortal rank, then even the Xian family, one of the major forces in Star University, would have to consider making friends with him. An immortal rank cultivator was already considered an expert. It wasn't that Star University didn't have immortal rank experts, but he had never seen one so young. The self-proclaimed strongest youth was only a half immortal rank 7 or 8, and that person was already over 20 years old. At this moment, seeing a youth who looked no more than 16 or 17 years old breaking through to the immortal rank, he couldn't help but wipe his sweat. Such terrifying talent was simply heaven-defying. At this rate of development, maybe after 10,000 years, a god whose name would shake the entire divine continent will be born. If they were on good terms with him, the Xian family would definitely obtain unimaginable benefits. In just a short moment, Xian Fu had already thought through the pros and cons of this. With this kind of brain, it would be a waste if he didn't go into business. In the room, feeling the sudden surge of energy around him, Ming seemed to have guessed that Yin Nuoxing wanted to desperately break through to the immortal rank. But if he was impatient and acted recklessly like this, he might suffer from qi deviation. Big brother, don't worry, Ming is fine. Shocked by Yin Nuoxing's actions, Ming hurriedly got up, tiptoed, and used his small hand to touch the light cocoon as he hurriedly said. Upon hearing Ming's voice, the light cocoon stopped its frantic absorption of energy. However, it continued to radiate an extremely dazzling radiance. Not only did the whirlpool outside not dissipate, but also expanded significantly. Vast amounts of soul power dominated the energy in this area, continuously extracting the various elemental energies drifting between heaven and earth. Seeing that the light cocoon had settled down, Ming also heaved a sigh of relief. His small body curled up in the bed, and he didn't dare to do anything else lest he disturb Yin Nuoxing. After settling down, Yin Nuoxing also sped up his breakthrough. He felt that in this unfamiliar place, he naturally had some confidence in breaking through to the immortal rank. Not to mention that he had more than 10 divine tools on him. Just the light cocoon he formed was enough to defend himself. After going through a few heavenly tribulations, Yin Nuoxing also understood a little. This light cocoon seemed to be able to absorb destructive energy, so naturally, he wasn't afraid of being interrupted by people with bad intentions. But I really didn't choose a good place to break through. In the soul world, Yin Nuoxing scratched his head in distress. He was indeed too anxious this time, directly breaking through without choosing a place. But he was already halfway through, so he couldn't just stop now, right? Who told you to be so impatient? Don't you know that haste makes waste? In front of Yin Nuoxing, a beautiful girl with an oval face sat quietly. Her light purple hair hung down straight like silk, and her body was surrounded by gorgeous purple flames. A few faint lines of fire connected her and Yin Nuoxing. This was naturally Ziyi. She seemed to have been staying in Yin Nuoxing's soul all this time and didn't really come out even after being refined. After being taught a lesson, Yin Nuoxing only smiled bitterly. Between his palms, purple flames and blue flames intertwined. However, if one had to describe it, it was more like the purple flames were eating the blue flames. After all, the blue flames were only a small ball, and the purple flames were faintly dyed with a faint blue color. It wandered in the purple flames, as if the two types of flames had merged together. Be careful, come to mind. Don't be agitated anymore. It'll be fun if the flames explode. Right now, we're in your soul world. At the very least, you'll be seriously injured. Ziyi yawned, covered her small mouth with her delicate hand, and said lazily. She didn't know why this guy suddenly went crazy and suggested to merge the flames. Did he really think that he could do whatever he wanted just because he had the spiritual divine body? Fortunately, This was only the merging of ordinary flames and divine flames. The former would be firmly suppressed, so there wouldn't be any accidents during the merging process. If it was the merging of two divine flames, let's see how you'll die. Yes, yes. Yin Nuashing curled his lips and nodded in response. His mind was focused on the flames on his palms. Looking at the two balls of flames fusing together, he couldn't help but laugh. Relying on the unique effects of the soul-burning formula and the spiritual divine body, he actually managed to merge the two types of flames that had repelled each other. However, the blue flames were clearly too weak. It was said to be merging, but in fact, it was almost completely devoured by the purple flames. Moreover, the purple flames only had a tiny bit of blue color. However, although the blue flames were very weak, Yin Nuashing could still feel that the power of the purple flames seemed to have increased by a lot. I wonder what will happen when the two types of divine flames merge together. Licking his lips, this thought suddenly flashed across Yin Nuashing's mind. Then, he couldn't get rid of it no matter how hard he tried. He couldn't get rid of it and seemed to stubbornly want to give it a try. Hearing this, Z instantly lost his composure and spat out a mouthful of water. His eyes widened as he stared at Yin Nuashing. That kind of expression was as if he was looking at a lunatic. After being stunned for a long time, he said, "Are you crazy? I'm just saying, don't be so agitated." Yin Nuashing stuck out her tongue and laughed. However, this thought was rooted in the bottom of his heart. Ziyi, who was connected to his mind, naturally felt it too. "Don't be rash." Ziyi glanced at him and said indifferently. In his heart, he wasn't too surprised. He was just a little shocked, as if he already knew that Ziyi would do this. "Don't worry." Yin Nuashing shrugged and grinned. He was looking forward to the power of the two types of divine flames after they merged. Burning mountains and boiling seas should be very easy, right? Seeing that Ziyi did not have much of an emotional fluctuation, Yin Nuashing tilted his head and then continued to throw his mind into the two balls of flames in his hands. The fusion here was not complete yet. If his mind fluctuated a little and messed it up, then his fate would be somewhat miserable. When Yin Nuashing's merging of the flames was going smoothly, time quietly passed. The half-a-month journey seemed very short. Compared to Yin Nuashing's journey, it was just a blink of an eye. During this half-a-month journey, the Xian family's flying ship increased its altitude by quite a bit. Because Yin Nuashing's cultivation caused too much of a commotion, flying at a low altitude was very conspicuous. However, even if they flew a lot higher, it still attracted some people's attention. The energy fluctuation was very difficult to conceal. They didn't have anyone who could cast a spatial barrier or mobility barrier. Along the way, when they passed by many small cities, there were experts who came up to investigate. There were even people who wanted to invite that big shot down for a chat. This made Xian Fu a little helpless. However, he politely sent them all back. At the same time, he got people to increase the speed of the ship. After leaving the city, they slowed down. After half a month's time, the flying ship also neared Star Universe City. Looking at the huge tower that stood in the sky, Xian Fu couldn't help but raise his head to look at the energy whirlpool that was still spinning. He was slightly anxious in his heart. Mr. Yin still hasn't finished his cultivation? We're about to reach Star Universe City. If we enter the city like this, it will inevitably cause some unnecessary trouble. It won't be good if other forces see us. Xian Fu scratched his head and couldn't help but mutter. The way he addressed Yin Nuashing had unknowingly changed. The strong were easily respected. This sentence was really not wrong. After hesitating for a while, Xian Fu gritted his teeth and got people to slow down the ship. Then, he quickly walked towards the direction of the residential area, wanting to wake Yin Nuashing up. Boom! Just after Xian Fu walked a few steps, a strange fluctuation suddenly came out from the room. Being affected by the fluctuation of energy, the originally clear sky suddenly darkened. A large patch of dark clouds inexplicably appeared on top of the ship and spread out in a manner that covered the sky. Silver blue lightning flashed rapidly within it. A few bolts of lightning peeked out from the clouds and cut through the darkness. After that, the entire patch of dark clouds trembled a few times and began to appear gold, red, blue, green, and bright silver. When the last color appeared from the clouds and dyed the entire cloud into a six-colored thundercloud, a terrifying energy pressure suddenly reverberated from the heaven and earth. The rumbling sound made people mistakenly think that the entire space was trembling. This is heavenly tribulation. Xian Fu was the first to notice this situation. When he saw the colorful lightning bolts randomly flying around in the clouds, his mouth instantly dropped. In their experience, they had never seen such a thing as a heavenly tribulation. But today, even though they had seen it, that kind of energy was enough to split this ship into pieces. Wong. Just when Xian Fu didn't know what to do, a colorful cocoon of light suddenly rushed out from the residential area. The light it emitted wasn't any weaker than the colorful thundercloud in the sky. The cocoon of light only paused for a moment when it rushed out. Then, under the astonished gazes of Xian Fu and the others, it rushed out of the ship and quickly flew towards the mountain range in the distance. Along with it, the colorful thundercloud in the sky seemed to have followed the cocoon of light. Looking at the suddenly clear sky, Xian Fu and the others heaved a sigh of relief. That aura was too terrifying. Chapter 195. In a mountain range, a few roars of beasts could be heard from time to time. Warm sunlight poured down from the sky, and the leaves swayed with a crisp and pleasant sound. In just a moment, the might of thunder suddenly descended on this mountain range, causing the magical beasts that were dozing off below to suddenly raise their hairs. They looked up with eyes full of horror. A huge thundercloud had appeared in the sky at some point, covering the sky and the sun. Colorful lightning descended from the thundercloud and struck towards a certain place. The pressure that filled the sky frightened those magical beasts, and they quickly fled. They were taking a good afternoon nap. What was going on? Boom, boom, boom. When the lightning that filled the sky fell from the sky, all of them turned and pointed at the light cocoon somewhere in the sky. From an outsider's point of view, it looked like a folded lightning bolt that struck the light cocoon in a flash. Some scarlet and dazzling talismans appeared on the surface of the colorful light cocoon, resisting all the destructive lightning bolts. Then, with a flash of light, purple flames with blazing heat wrapped around the lightning bolt, refining it and transmitting all the energy into the light cocoon. The power is too strong. Is it because I didn't experience the heavenly tribulation in the previous few realms? A somewhat puzzled voice suddenly came from the light cocoon that flickered with lightning. At the beginning, the light cocoon directly used the talismans, and the talismans contained in the soul-burning technique also rushed out on their own. It seemed to be a little difficult to resist. Boom! The light cocoon trembled violently, and purple flames swept out like a flaming storm, forming a tornado that connected the earth and the sky. The blazing heat burst out, causing the forest below to emit white smoke. Many trees were even ignited in an instant. The purple flames rose and covered the whole mountain range, as if they were going to burn this mountain range to ashes. The flaming tornado directly reached the thundercloud above and swept it in. Whether it was the thundercloud or the lightning, they were all mixed together. The purple tornado suddenly became gorgeous and colorful, and it faintly carried the crackling sound of thunder. Since the spiritual divine body can accommodate all living things, then I'll swallow this thundercloud. At the center of the tornado, Yun Nuashing's sly laughter sounded from within the cocoon of light. Then an enormous suction force suddenly erupted from the cocoon of light and sucked in the thunderclouds and lightning. If those experts who had experienced the heavenly tribulation saw this, they would definitely blush and curse. Motherf asterisk cur. Tribulation transcendence was such a dangerous thing. If one was careless and failed, it was not impossible for them to be seriously injured or even die. How could you be so reckless in your hands? Is it fun? The stirred thunderclouds seemed to be stunned for a moment. At some point, they actually quieted down. Then, in an instant, they suddenly erupted with an unusually powerful power. The lightning seemed to connect into an ocean, raging wildly in the flaming tornado, forming one after another lightning curtains that moved around the light cocoon. Boom! Kacha! Flames and lightning intertwined to create a crazy dance. Rhythmic crackling sounds rose and fell, like the rising and falling of the tide, like wave after wave. A roar that shook the soul resounded. And in this large decibel music, the sound of light cocoons shattering suddenly rang out, as if they could not withstand such a huge amount of energy, and began to shatter. Boom! After persistently striking for half an hour, the thunderclouds finally gave up on this tough bone that they could not chew on and slowly dissipated. The might of the lightning that filled the sky gradually dissipated, and even the tornado stopped. The forest below had long been destroyed beyond recognition. It was barren, and there was purple sand everywhere. Not a single tree was left. Kacha! The tornado dissipated, revealing a thin layer of light cocoon. Then, cracks began to appear on it. In just a short moment, the cracks had spread to the entire thin layer. Then, with a bang, it turned into light spots that filled the sky. The light cocoon shattered, revealing Yun Nuoxing, who was wearing a black windbreaker. His light purple hair was mixed with a strand of ocean blue hair that swayed with the wind. Warm sunlight poured down from the sky, and the golden light shone on Yun Nuoxing's body. His entire body seemed to be covered with a layer of golden gauze, appearing extremely beautiful, just like a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. Ugh! Yun Nuoxing stretched his arms and leaned back. He let out a low groan, and the bones in his body began to crackle, like the sound of beans being popped. Abundant energy flowed through his entire body. The overflowing energy turned into a thin mist that covered Yun Nuoxing. Immortal energy flowed through him, making him appear ethereal. Immortal energy. This meant that Yun Nuoxing had officially advanced to the immortal stage. The origin energy in his body had been completely converted into immortal energy. In his lower abdomen, the cube crystal that was originally the size of 2 fingers had completely turned into a round bead. However, it was only the size of a finger. Faint immortal energy lingered around it. Although its size had shrunk, the energy it contained was incomparable to before. Immortal energy and origin energy. The immortal stage versus the mortal stage. These were of a higher level of energy. How could they be compared? I've reached the immortal stage. However, if I always rely on external forces to break through, won't there be trouble in the future? Clenching his fist, Yun Nuoxing put away the fire bead that was floating in front of him. When he saw that it hadn't changed at all, and that the sentence was still engraved on it, he couldn't help but laugh. However, this shouldn't be completely relying on external forces, right? After all, it's condensed energy, so it shouldn't count as external forces. Moreover, the flow of energy in my body doesn't feel empty. There shouldn't be any problems. Sensing the situation in his body, the worry in his heart dissipated in less than a minute. I know that spiritual godly physiques are very reckless, but I didn't know that there was a spiritual godly physique as reckless as you. Just as Yun Nuoxing was feeling good about himself, Zai's voice sounded in his mind. There was a hint of anger in his voice, as if he was blaming him for his actions just now. All right, since there's nothing to do, let's not bother about the process, Yun Nuoxing said with a smile, as if he was a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. If you act recklessly like this, something will happen sooner or later. Zai sighed. He knew that Yun Nuoxing was a stubborn person, so he didn't waste his breath to say anything. When Yun Nuoxing was in pain, he would naturally restrain himself. However, he still couldn't help but remind him. Then I'll be more careful next time. Yun Nuoxing scratched his head and smiled. It would be strange if you were more careful. Zai muttered in his heart. He didn't say anything on the surface and only softly said, "And." After replying to Zai half-heartedly and half-seriously, Yun Nuoxing looked into the distance. 6 wings spread out from his back, and he quickly flew in the direction he came from. It had been a while since he came out. If he stayed for too long, he would think that he had been thrown away. Therefore, when he flew, he even used the light element. After Yin Nuoxing advanced to the immortal rank, his body's energy capacity increased by a lot. He didn't need to use the light element intermittently like before to increase his speed. Now, he could directly use it to support his flight. Of course, all of this was under the premise that he didn't use the light element at all. And with the support of the light element, Yin Nuoxing's speed could be said to be chasing the stars and chasing the moon. In just a short moment, Yin Nuoxing saw the huge flying ship in the sky. He flapped the 6 wings on his back and quickly retracted them. His figure streaked across the sky like lightning. In the next instant, he appeared on the ship and rushed into the residential area. On the deck, Xian Fu and the others were eagerly waiting. Ever since the light cocoon rushed out, they couldn't sense anything and didn't know how the tribulation was going. In the room, Ming, who was also anxiously waiting with his neck stretched out, was nestled in his bed. His large purple-black eyes looked uneasily at the door of the room. His heart was a little uneasy. Chua, big brother. A black figure suddenly rushed in from the door of the room, scaring Ming, who was already uneasy, to the point that he took 2 steps back. When he saw who it was, he immediately cried out in joy. He jumped off the bed and plunged into Yin Nuoxing's embrace, rubbing against him a few times like a spoiled child. Yin Nuoxing reached out and hugged the petite body in his embrace. He dotingly rubbed his head and laughed. Then, he carried Ming out and prepared to go to Xingyu City. He wanted to go out and take a look. Walking out of the room, Yin Nuoxing's figure flashed and appeared on the deck. He smiled at Xian Fu and the others. Little brother Yin, you're back. Seeing the figure that suddenly appeared on the deck, Xian Fu and the others were stunned for a moment. Then, they suddenly burst out in joyful voices. They took a few steps forward and cupped their fists to congratulate him. Big brother Xian Fu, my life was saved by you. Be more natural. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly and waved his hand. He took a step to the side and didn't accept Xian Fu's greeting. Little brother is too polite. We just gave you a hand in passing. We didn't help much. Hearing this, Xian Fu hurriedly shook his head. He looked at Yin Nuoxing with eyes full of reverence. Immortal rank, that kind of level was perhaps the limit for them. They were already old and had no successors. They weren't like Yin Nuoxing, who was 16 or 17 years old and was already an immortal rank expert. Experts would be respected no matter where they were, especially in some cities where there weren't many experts. In Yin Nuoxing's 8 characters had already touched the ground. Smiling, Yin Nuoxing looked towards the horizon. There, a magnificent city appeared. A towering black tower stood in the middle of the city. It seemed to be the city's landmark, but he didn't know what it was used for. That's the Xin family's spirit refining tower. It was built based on the Red Star Academy's Earth Pagoda. The principle is similar, but it's not as detailed. When the soul enters it to train, the damage it receives is the same as the damage in the real world. However, the damage is much smaller. Seeing the surprise in his eyes, Xian Fu smiled and explained. There was a hint of pride in his words. To be able to replicate the Red Star Academy's training facility, this wasn't an ability that anyone could have. It's actually replicated. Hearing that, Yin Nuoxing looked at him in shock and said he had stayed in the Red Star Academy before and had entered the Earth Pagoda. That was the best place to experience life and death battles, and he remembered that he had been stuck at the 50th checkpoint for 10 days. The danger of that battle was still fresh in Yin Nuoxing's mind. After all, if it was in the real world, he would have died countless times. I'll take my leave first. Let's meet in the city later. Retracting his gaze from the distance, Yin Nuoxing said to Xian Fu. He couldn't wait any longer. After parting for half a month, he was worried that something would happen to Yuan. Although the latter had mastered a ceiling-level array, and with that kind of nature, there shouldn't be anyone who could make her suffer, he was still worried. After saying that, Yin Nuoxing ignored Xian Fu and the others. Carrying Ming, he turned into a black lightning and flew towards Xingyu City. Seeing this, Xian Fu couldn't help but smile bitterly. However, he didn't say anything to stop him. He only hurriedly transmitted a message. Mr. Yun, if it's possible, please help my Xian family. Chapter 196. His body turned into a ray of golden light, streaking across the sky, leaving behind a small tail that quickly dissipated. Like a golden meteor, he rushed towards the city in the distance. Xingyu City, it's quite big. Yin Nuoxing stopped at the edge of Xingyu City. He floated in the air and carefully looked at the first city he came into contact with in the Divine Continent. His eyes were filled with surprise. Xingyu City was a few 100,000 miles in size, much smaller than Xingming City, but bigger than Divine Weapon City. Looking down from the sky, he could barely see everything. Crowds gathered like sardines on the streets, swaying back and forth. Waves of shouts, endless streams of horses and carriages, tens of thousands of buildings stood erect, and shops were everywhere. It was completely a miniature version of the world. Looking at the flow of people, it seemed to be an extremely prosperous city. The so-called Spirit Refining Tower was located in the north of Xingyu City. The tall black iron tower was somewhat strict. Under the slanted sunlight, half of its image was exposed like a landmark of Xingyu City. The entire city was mainly made up of dozens of streets that ran horizontally to the end, arranged in a radial pattern. Other than the Xian family's Spirit Refining Tower in the north, Yin Nuoxing also saw different landmark buildings in 3 other directions, which seemed to belong to other forces. The most eye-catching one was the center of Xingyu City, where a group of blue buildings stood out compared to the surrounding yellow buildings. On the tallest ice blue tower, 4 big words appeared. Galaxy College. Galaxy College? Yin Nuoxing was stunned. He had heard of this name before. When he was still living in the Red Star Academy, Xianyin had shown him some information about other colleges, including Galaxy College. It was said that it was quite famous in the Divine Continent, but it was not as big as the Red Star Academy. Well, academies can be found everywhere. Yin Nuoxing shook his head vigorously after looking at the blue buildings for a while. There were specialists in the academy to guide one's cultivation, and any kind of cultivation techniques, herbs, arrays, or weapons were basically available. He had also been to the loft of the Red Star Academy and knew how precious the things stored there were. Cultivating in the academy could be said to be twice the result with half the effort. However, he had never liked places like academies for cultivation. Perhaps it was due to his unruly nature, but he preferred to be unrestrained and free to soar in the sky, without any contact with others. This must be the autism that big sister Yuyin was talking about. Yin Nuoxing touched his face and couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. Yuyin had always said that he had autism and didn't like to see people. He quite agreed with it, and also felt that he was a dark animal. Shaking his head, he threw all other thoughts to the back of his mind. After identifying the direction, he quickly swooped down towards the city and flew towards the distant place, where he could vaguely see the shadow of a teleportation gate. The teleportation point was in the north of Star Universe City and was a distance away from Star Universe City. It was also a square standing among the mountains, as if a mountain had been flattened to build this square. The scale was much smaller than the Bluestone Square in Star Underworld City. The size of the teleportation gate was also much smaller. The small one was only 100 feet high, and the big one was only a few 100 feet high. It seemed that they were all used for short-distance teleportation, as a rich spatial energy filled the space. After a rough glance, Yin Nuoxing withdrew his gaze. His gaze swept around, and among the many teleportation gates, he suddenly found a stone array that was also made of purple stones. Without thinking, he rushed down. Perhaps the teleportation passageway was almost closed down after the creation of the space teleportation gate. There was not even a guard here. The 8 purple stone pillars were covered in dust, and the underground array was covered in a thick layer of dust. When a strong wind blew, it would raise a cloud of dust. It looked like it had accumulated dust for countless years, and did not look like it had been used or opened. The 8 stone pillars even had some cracks that had accumulated over time. It was obvious that it had not been maintained for a long time. This was probably the reason why the door in the passageway could not be opened. Desolate and dilapidated, this was the only rhythm of this 10-foot stone array. Yin Nuoxing walked lightly on it, leaving footprints behind him. With every step he took, a large cloud of dust would splash up, dyeing his trousers and shoes an earthy yellow. Phew! It's really broken beyond recognition. I don't know how many years it has been since it was maintained, but that guy still said so confidently that it was quite stable. Evil Spirit looked at the underground array that was about to be destroyed. Yin Nuoxing could not help but scratch his head. Riding on this thing was purely a trap for him. I want to protect my rights. Deceive the consumers. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and could not help but curse fiercely in his heart. If he returned to Xingming City in the future, he would definitely find that guy and have a good talk with him. It doesn't look like it has been used in a short period of time. Purple Knight sighed. He said that Yin and the others had already escaped from the teleportation gate. Since she said so, there should be no problem. However, Yin Nuoxing and the others had escaped one after the other. The speed of the teleportation gate was extremely fast, exceeding the speed of light by many times. When they left the gate one after the other, no one knew where the two of them were sent to. Time rewind. After thinking for a while, Yin Nuoxing took out the divine mirror of light and silently chanted. Boundless immortal energy spiraled around his body like a tornado, causing the stone array to tremble a few times. The whistling immortal energy spiraled in the air for a while, then rushed into the golden mirror in his hand. The exchange rate was in the center of the mirror. Soon after, an image was slowly projected in the space in front of him. Spatial energy, the evil spirit, eye opened, and a brilliant colorless light illuminated Yin Nuoxing's face. His eyes stared at the image. He wanted to see the flow of spatial energy. If he could see the flow of spatial energy, he might be able to follow this trace and find Yin and Zihun. Unfortunately, things did not go according to his wishes. Yin Nuoxing did not find any trace of energy. He had even rewound the time from 10 days ago to a month ago, but there were still no clues. The sky in the image was white then black, black then white, but he did not see any trace of silver blue. Big brother, point the mirror in another direction. Maybe you can find it. Just as Yin Nuoxing was anxiously staring, Ming tugged on his long hair and said softly. Yin Nuoxing stared blankly and felt that it made sense. The transmission channel was not stable. From the image on the screen, Xingyu City and Xingming City were not far apart. However, when the coordinates were inputted and magnified on the screen, it was a distance of millions of li. If they incorrectly inputted 1 unit more or 1 unit less, the final destination would be a little frightening. However, Yin Nuoxing had not studied this matter and could only roll his eyes and search in the dark. According to Ming, Yin Nuoxing shifted the direction of the divine mirror of light to the other 4 directions. This time, he searched very carefully. He searched backward minute by minute, afraid that he would miss something. In the few directions, especially the north and east, he checked back and forth several times. The transmission channel that they came from Xingming City was connected to Xingyu City. The direction pointed from southwest to northeast. Xingyu City was not in the west. Xian Fu had told him before that it should be in the northwest position. When Yin Nuoxing first heard this news, he didn't think much of it. The west side of the Divine Continent, the entire western region, was called the Western Region. Because the search was very careful, it took a little more time. However, after 3 hours in the south direction, in the sky, he saw a wisp of silver blue color that he had been dreaming of. It was like a Milky Way hanging in the sky, pointing straight to the silver transmission channel in the east. He was so excited that he wanted to jump up. The time was 21 days ago, which happened to be the time when they fell out of the spatial channel. However, why was the direction a little off? Yin Nuoxing didn't understand. In fact, he didn't know if the spatial channel he was looking for was the one they used. Although spatial channels were gradually being eliminated in the world, it didn't mean that no one used it anymore. He had used it once not long ago. Well, the time is right and the direction is not wrong. Logically speaking, it should be possible that this is it. Yes, after calming down the excitement in his heart, Yin Nuashing comforted himself. He carefully looked back and forth a few times at this time, but he couldn't find anything else. The scene reflected by the mirror slowly faded. In the end, the light completely disappeared. Then, it entered the divine light mirror in Yin Nuashing's hand. Seeing this scene, Yin Nuashing was a little happy and a little disappointed. He originally wanted to directly confirm whether Yuyin was in the spatial channel, but he couldn't see her. Suddenly thinking of something, Yin Nuashing rolled up his sleeves and looked at the green bracelet on his left hand. It was given to him by Yuyin when they were still in Xingling City. It seemed to be an item used to ward off evil spirits. Later on, it did help a little in the ruins. The dark red was Yu Yin's blood essence. It hadn't dissipated yet, and there was a faint fluctuation of her soul. It proved that she was still fine and nothing had happened to her. It's fine as long as you're still alive. I will go and find you. I will definitely find you and bring you back. Yin Nuashing sighed. His palm touched the bracelet with some nostalgia as he murmured in a low voice. Now that he had confirmed that the spatial channel turned to the east, it shouldn't be difficult to find Yuyin and bring her back, right? However, the divine prefecture was so vast and boundless. Who knew where the east would lead to? The easternmost part of the continent was the east of the Kuan Yuan region. Further east was the illusory space of the star field. It shouldn't be. I've already opened the spatial channel. There is only a difference of a few tenths of a second when we went out. We shouldn't have crossed the divine prefecture. After thinking for a while, he threw those unrealistic thoughts out of his mind. Although they had fallen into the void after breaking the spatial channel, they were still within the control of the spatial channel and would flow along with it. According to Ziyi, the two of them had escaped when they went out of the spatial channel. In that case, you might have also come out. It was just that they were separated by a long distance because of the time difference. However, Sister Yuyin also has a divine weapon and a sealing magic formation. She has learned the flame demon burning sky incantation. I don't think anyone can hurt her. I'll take a stroll around Xingyu City first. After thinking for a while, Yin Nuashing nodded. He wasn't afraid that Yuyin would be in any danger. Her means were no less than his. Moreover, the old god wouldn't have the time to care about a little practitioner at the mortal level. Who's there? Just as Yin Nuashing was arranging the itinerary, a shout came from outside the stone array. Perhaps Yin Nuashing had stayed here for too long and was noticed by someone. Or perhaps it was someone who was attracted by the fluctuation of energy. Although the fluctuation of energy caused by the spatial channel was concealed outside, the fluctuation of energy in this place wasn't small. The energy used to trace back time was relatively large. Yin Nuashing was anxious and even mobilized the energy of heaven and earth. Perhaps it had been sensed. In short, someone was coming. The person who came was wearing a purple gold robe. He was about 30 or 40 years old. There was a flamboyant Xian character embroidered on his chest. Obviously, he was from the Xian family. At this moment, this person stood outside the transmission stone array and stared sharply at Yin Nuashing, who was in the center of the stone array. Someone from a Xian family? That Xian family? If that's the case, could it be that the spatial channel to the divine lands is from Xingming City to Xingyu City? However, because Yin Nuashing's back was facing him, the person who came couldn't see his face. He had nothing to be afraid of. If he went out, he would definitely be interrogated as if he was a spy. It would be an unnecessary trouble. Although the spatial channel had not been repaired for a long time and was no longer in use, no matter what, it was something that belonged to the Xian family. Trespassing didn't seem to be a good thing. Really? Why are your eyes so good? Don't you know that it's better to look less? Hearing the shout, Yin Nuashing curled his lips and muttered indifferently. The colorful pattern on his right hand glowed faintly. Then, a small enchantment quietly opened up and wrapped around Yin Nuashing. Now, because Ling Hongjian was completely absorbed by him, he didn't have to take it out to open the enchantment that was unique to divine weapons. With a thought, he could open it. And Yin Nuashing was like this. Obviously, he didn't plan to go out and say anything. When a middle-aged man saw that Yin Nuashing didn't move, he frowned and walked in. Just as he was about to open his mouth to ask, the person in front of him suddenly disappeared in the blink of an eye. Furthermore, he completely disappeared. Even his energy sense was cut off. If it wasn't for the footprints left on the ground, he would have thought that he had seen a ghost. Where did I go? However, the man still widened his eyes in shock. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. Then he swallowed his saliva and immediately retracted his steps. He turned around and walked away. He couldn't help but mutter, "I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything." Chapter 197. After quietly leaving the stone array, Yin Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief. Now that he knew where Yuan was, it would be more convenient to find her in the future. He was not in a hurry at the moment. Looking at the bracelet, her situation should be fine. Once he was done with the matters here, he would walk around Starry Sky City and look for her. When he left, he heard Xian Fu calling for help. It seemed like the matter was urgent. The location of the Xian clan was easy to recognize. He just had to walk towards the Iron Tower. As the tallest and most iconic building in Starry Sky City, many people should know about it. If he guessed correctly, the matter that Xian Fu was talking about might be related to this spirit refining tower. Not in a hurry to rush to the Iron Tower, Yin Nuoxing wandered around the streets to collect information. At the same time, he also wanted to understand the situation of the various forces in Starry Sky City. He did not want to foolishly run over and not know if he was sold. Out of habit, he bought a stick of candied haws and held it in his mouth. He listened carefully. Other than the Xian clan that he heard the most, there was also the Shuang clan. Almost every 3 sentences about the Xian clan would have a sentence about the Shuang clan. It seemed like there were some agreements or conflicts mixed in. In these topics, Yin Nuoxing summarized them into one thing: Spirit Refining Tower. This was an imitation of the Red Star Academy's Earth Pagoda. It was an extremely good and relatively safe building with a nurturing function. With it, one could continuously nurture batch after batch of talents. The kind of life and death battles that were close to reality and safe was something that many people wanted but could not get. After all, fighting was the most effective way to increase one's strength. Especially in a life and death battle, it could maximize one's potential. It was said that a person could explode with 10 times the strength in a life and death situation. But if it was a life and death battle, once it started, there would definitely be casualties. If the opponent died, then it would be fine. But if one lost, then no matter how much they fought, it would be useless. If they died, then what was the point of breaking through? And with this safe method of fighting, no matter how much you fought, you would not die. Even if you died, in fact, it was just a split of the soul energy that would be scattered. The soul would be trained inside, and the body would not be affected outside. It was a perfect cultivation tool for heroes. Has the Red Star Academy's reputation reached such an extent? Even in the distant Sourcepeak region, their reputation in the Divine Prefecture is not weak. Yin Nuoxing was surprised to hear the conversations around him. He could not help but look at the Star River Academy in the center of the Star University. Logically speaking, the Star River Academy was located so close to the city, and its disciples could be seen everywhere on the streets. Its reputation should not be weak, but it was suppressed by the Red Star Academy. Even the disciples of the Academy yearned for that sacred place. Where's the sacred? Yin Nuoxing laughed bitterly. He had stayed in the Red Star Academy, and only the Earth Pagoda had left some impression on him. He did not know anything else. The existence of such a thing was enough to increase the overall strength of a force rapidly. No matter where it was an existence that would make people jealous. The Spirit Refining Tower seemed to be a private property in Star Universe City and was not open to the public. Of course, other forces naturally wouldn't just watch the Xian family grow stronger day by day. They would definitely think of ways to destroy or seize the Spirit Refining Tower. However, the possibility of the latter was obviously higher. This kind of thing that could speed up one's cultivation, it was too wasteful to destroy it so casually. The Earth Pagoda had brought the Red Star Academy to its position in the realm of the gods. A replica of the spirit refining tower had allowed the Xian family to live smoothly in Starry Universe City. This was enough to prove their strength. Moreover, the Earth Pagoda that was unique to the Red Star Academy was naturally not something that could be casually replicated. In the end, the spirit refining tower only had a slight resemblance. It seemed that the Red Star Academy did not care about this matter. An ordinary man's wealth is his own ruin. Biting off a bottle gourd, Yin Nuoxing sighed. Along the way, he had gained some understanding of the situation in the city. The Xian family and the Shuang family seemed to have a deep grudge. The two families had been fighting openly and secretly for thousands of years, and both had their victories and losses. However, there were no incidents of either family being destroyed. Gradually, the conflict was put aside. On the surface, they were developing peacefully and did not interfere with each other. However, in private, they were still fighting fiercely. From the competition of strength to the competition of business, there were 81 trades, and every trade had its own conflicts. Ever since the Xian family had replicated the spirit refining tower from the Red Star Academy, it had only been a few decades, but their overall strength had increased by a large margin. Gradually, they had left the Shuang family behind. Although the latter was anxious, they could only watch helplessly. If it was not for the fact that the Xian family was afraid that the two tigers would fight and cause heavy casualties and damage to their foundation, the Shuang family would have been destroyed long ago. Taking advantage of the time when the Xian family was still afraid, the Shuang family had joined forces with the other two families in the city, forming a huge force that suppressed the Xian family. However, they were unable to take down the Xian family in one fell swoop. After all, the Xian family was not weak. Although the three families had joined forces, they did not have the confidence to rush forward and fight with their lives on the line. They were all afraid of being stabbed in the back. As for the three families who were in a deadlock, they did not want to fight with their lives on the line. However, they did not want the Xian family to be happy here. Therefore, they organized a so-called martial arts competition, which was limited to the younger generation. The date was 3 days later, and the wager was the status of the four families in Starry Universe City. Although the wager was shocking, it was obvious that they were bullying the Xian family. 3 versus 1 arena. Although the Xian family was strong, it did not mean that they had enough younger generation members. The Shuang family and the other two families could overwhelm the Xian family with their numbers. Although they did not say that they could not seek outside help, there was no way they could find outside help in such a short period of time. Aside from the Xian family, the 3 most powerful families in Starry Universe City had joined forces. The Xian family could only watch anxiously and laugh. Of course, if the Xian family could really survive this martial arts competition, then their reputation would definitely soar. Just based on everything that the 3 families had in Starry Universe City, the Xian family would be able to dominate Starry Universe City. However, the prerequisite for all of this was that they had to survive. The wager is quite big. I like it. Yin Nuoxing listened to the discussions on the street as if it was a daily conversation. He understood the situation more or less. It was similar to what he thought. It was all caused by the spirit refining tower. Of course, he was so excited because he wanted to see which of the 4 families would be eliminated in the end. Xian family or the other 3 families, which side would it be? Brother, your thoughts are dark and gloating. Seeing Yin Nuoxing's sinister smile, Ming could not help but tug at his collar and mumble. How is it dark? Yin Nuoxing stopped laughing immediately after hearing that. He put on a serious face and said, Ming, in this world where the strong prey on the weak, this kind of thing is very common. What you see is just a small part of it. These things happen all the time in Pantheon. If you don't want to be eaten by others, you have to become stronger. After saying that, he stuck out his tongue. He originally wanted to say that he had to become cruel, but he suddenly felt that it was not good for Ming's education, so he immediately changed his words. Oh. Ming tilted his head and looked at Yin Nuoxing with his eyes that were as bright as gemstones. He nodded as if he understood. Yin Nuoxing scratched her little nose and smiled. His body trembled slightly, and he instantly disappeared from the spot. He rushed towards the spirit refining tower. He stopped in front of a huge manor and saw many carriages parked at the entrance. These carriages all had the same blue emblem. Seeing this emblem, Yin Nuoxing identified it for a while. He suddenly smiled strangely and said, "The Shuang family actually came to find us?" Yin Nuoxing flipped over the wall and stood for a while. He saw a huge ship parked in the backyard of the manor. In the middle was a magnificent palace. The unique layout of the manor made it feel more majestic. Brother Xian Fu and the others have also returned. After looking at the ship for a while, Yin Nuoxing looked at the building in the middle. Looking from afar, he could see many figures gathered in the hall. Half of them were purple, and the other half were ice blue. Outside the hall, there were a few people who were nervously looking at the hall. After searching for a while, Yin Nuoxing found Xian Fu's figure in the hall. However, looking at the position he was sitting in, it seemed that he was not as simple as a deacon. Beside him, at the head of the hall, there was a middle-aged man wearing a luxurious brocade gown. His gaze was firmly fixed on the blue-clothed youth in front of him. The pair of sword-like eyebrows on his face gave him a domineering look. Raising his eyebrows, Yin Nuoxing lightly tapped on the wall with the tip of her foot. The light element in her body trembled, and her figure instantly appeared on the roof of the hall. She gently landed on the roof, and the soles of her feet touched the tiles like a dragonfly touching the water. After that, she gently squatted down and lifted a tile. The situation in the hall could be seen clearly through this hole. "Shuangya, you brought people to barge into my Xian family today. You have gone a little overboard. Don't think that you can be impudent just because your three families have united," the middle-aged man at the head of the hall slowly said. He narrowed his eyes and appeared somewhat lazy. However, his tone, that was neither high nor low, actually gave off a feeling of power without being angry. "Hee, Uncle Xian, you don't have to scare me like this. Today, I just want to ask if the conditions that I mentioned before can be agreed to." The blue-clothed youth called Shuangya smiled without the slightest care. His gaze looked to the side, at the purple-clothed girl who had her eyes tightly closed. There was not the slightest change in her expression. "The agreement has already been set and cannot be changed. Everything will be settled in 3 days." The middle-aged man indifferently glanced at him and said with an unquestionable tone, "Oh, so the Xian family is planning to use force?" Hearing this, Shuangya laughed heartily and slapped his thigh. However, a chill surged his eyes. "There's no room for discussion. If your Shuang family wants to come, my Xian family will take them all. Don't think that you can easily topple my Xian family just because you have randomly gathered a mob of people. Even if my Xian family is defeated in the end, you will be buried with us." The middle-aged man opened his sharp eyes and stared at Shuangya. His voice was still neither fast nor slow as he spoke. "Oh, it is indeed a little troublesome." Shuangya nodded and stood up. He slightly smiled and casually said, "Then I won't mess around. After the competition ends in 3 days, I still have to return to the Water Spirit Temple to train. I won't care about the rest of the matters." Shuangya's words were undoubtedly like a million-ton bomb dropped in the hall. The expressions of everyone in the hall changed greatly. Even a middle-aged man's lazy expression disappeared. He looked at Shuangya with a gloomy gaze and couldn't help but sigh. He didn't think that Shuangya would actually become a disciple of the Water Spirit Temple. In that case, the Shuang family's influence was not something the Xian family could compare to. Behind the Water Spirit Temple were 8 elemental temples. How could such a huge monster be compared to a small family like theirs? However, there was only one person's reaction that was different. What the hell? Why would the Water Spirit Temple produce this kind of trash? On the eaves, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but cover his face. When he heard the Water Spirit Temple's name, he almost fell down. Why was Shuangya's personality so different from Shui Xia's? No matter how he looked at it, he looked like a hypocrite. Compared to Shui Xia's gentleness and indifference, it was too different. Well, no one said that the Water Spirit Temple's people have the same temperament. Shaking his head with a bitter smile, Yin Nuoxing turned his gaze back to the hall. "For the sake of the friendship between the Xian family and the Shuang family, if you can agree to my conditions, then the competition in 3 days is fine. In any case, Seeing the Xian family's change in expression, Shuangya couldn't help but smile faintly. Halfway through his words, he was interrupted by a cold laugh. What? Is the Shuang family afraid? Setting a temporary condition without the competition. Is the Shuang family such cowardly people? Or are you afraid? Behind a middle-aged man, a young man wearing a purple and gold robe with long purple hair suddenly stepped forward and stood in front of the girl. His handsome face flashed with anger as he coldly stared at Shuangya and sneered. Shuangya choked on his words, and the warm smile that he was trying his best to maintain almost collapsed. His face trembled a few times as he looked at the young man who had suddenly walked out with a frosty look in his eyes. He continued to smile faintly and said, "Since the Xian family is going to be defeated, why must you seek your own death? I gave you a way out, but you didn't take it. Why bother? What do you say, young Master Xianming? Keep pretending. Keep pretending." Seeing that Shuangya didn't go berserk, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but roll his eyes. The Xian family has no cowards who are afraid of death. Everything will be decided in 3 days. Hearing this, the purple-robed man called Xianming coldly laughed and pointed at Shuangya. He didn't hide the disdain in his words. "All right, since you don't agree, I won't force you. Everything will wait until 3 days later at Xingyu Square. I'll just deal with it casually so I can return to the Water God Temple." Shuangya secretly ground his teeth and looked at Xianming with ill intentions. Then, with a burning gaze, he looked at the girl behind Xianming who hadn't said a word since the beginning. Still smiling faintly, he said, "In any case, everything will be ours in the end." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand and led the people of the Shuang clan out of the courtyard. They laughed and walked out of the courtyard at a leisurely pace. "I'm also drunk." Watching Shuangya and the others leave, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but raise his middle finger. Chapter 198. After coldly watching Shuangya and the others leave, the middle-aged man sighed. The coldness in his eyes dissipated, and he helplessly looked at the young man, whom Shuangya had called young Master Xianming. A doting look flashed across his eyes as he said, "Ming-er, are you confident?" "No." Hearing this, Xianming sighed and patted the head of the girl behind him. Her expression was still very calm. He bitterly smiled and said, "What else can I do? Could it be that I have to marry my sister off like this? I can't bear to. Even if I have to use the last of my strength, I will protect this family." Yin Nuoxing also turned her head. Shuangya, who had a wicked smile on his face, had been staring at the girl. At this moment, he was somewhat interested and also looked over. He was a little surprised as he muttered, "Sixth revolution, half immortal. Her aura is still somewhat warm. If I'm not wrong, it should be the fire element." The girl's eyebrows were like willows and her skin flickered with the color of ice crystals. She was tall, and her long purple hair hung down to her willow waist. She wore a purple robe, and under the purple robe, her curvaceous figure appeared particularly voluptuous. The only thing that clashed with her aura was the slight coldness on her face. Mei Mao looked a little stern. The girl raised her head and looked at Xianming, whose face was filled with gentleness. She blinked her eyes and took a deep breath. She softly said, "I also want to participate in the tournament in 3 days. The younger generation of the family is not as many as the 3 families. If we take turns to fight, we will be exhausted sooner or later. Big brother, you will be the last to participate." Hearing this, Xianming laughed bitterly. The 3 clans had come together. It was obvious that they wanted to crush the Xian clan. Moreover, even if the Xian clan's younger generation was quite strong, they would be exhausted to death in the arena no matter how strong they were. Moreover, the 3 clans had relatively strong young elites. Even if he could block 2 of them, what about the rest? Can third sister control her strength? Thinking of this, Xianming thought of his youngest sister and couldn't help but ask the middle-aged man sitting at the head seat. Hearing this, the middle-aged man's eyes dimmed. He couldn't hide the self-blame on his face. After a long while, he sighed and shook his head. "Big brother, you don't have to be so disappointed. We might still have hope." When he saw everyone's dispirited appearance, Xian Fu, who was at the side, couldn't help but laugh for a moment before he said, "In this competition, there's no restriction that the participants must be from the Xian clan. In other words, as long as you can find someone below the age of 25, it'll count." Second uncle, do you have an idea? Xianming looked at Xian Fu in surprise and couldn't help but blurt out. However, when he came back to his senses, he bitterly smiled. In Star University, there were very few people in the same generation who could enter the half-immortal realm. As for Shuangya, he had reached the 8th cycle of the half-immortal realm. He was at the same level as Xianming. In a one-on-one battle, Xianming still had a little chance of winning. However, if it was an arena competition, it was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't be weakened. Second sister had just reached the 6th cycle of the half-immortal stage. When the middle-aged man looked at him in surprise, Xian Fu laughed and said, "There's no one in Star Universe City. We can find someone outside the city." "Damn, we're going to fight again." Yin Nuoxing, who was on the roof, saw Xian Fu's sinister smile, and his face twitched a few times. However, after thinking for a moment, he nodded. If he wanted to fight, then so be it. He had already provoked a god emperor. Why would he be afraid of a small, half-immortal stage? Even if he offended the Water Spirit Hall, it was just a matter of shaking his hand. In any case, the token that Jin Wang gave him was a token that was shared by the 9 divine halls. It was likely that the Water Spirit Hall wouldn't find trouble with him. However, if it was another force, he would have to carefully consider it. It was his first time in the Divine Prefecture, and he didn't want to offend anyone. Thinking of this, Yin Nuoxing sighed and directly jumped out of the manor. Everyone in the hall was a little surprised when they heard Xian Fu's words, which seemed to be implying something. Even the girl, who had a calm expression, trembled her long eyelashes. She looked at the former with some surprise. Did he really have some connections? Report. Just as everyone was astonished and Xian Fu was smiling proudly, a shout suddenly came from the entrance of the hall. Everyone looked over and saw a person standing at the entrance of the hall. He cupped his hands and said respectfully, "There's someone outside who wants to see Second Master Xian." It's said to be an acquaintance." An acquaintance? Everyone was stunned. The middle-aged man also silently turned his head and looked at Xian Fu. However, he saw that the latter was also looking over with a confused expression. He couldn't help but be startled. "Isn't this your acquaintance? Why are you looking at me?" Suddenly thinking of something, Xian Fu was slightly delighted. Then he asked somewhat urgently, "Is he a young man?" "Yes." The person nodded and replied respectfully. "Quickly invite him in." Hearing the affirmative answer, a wild joy surged onto Xian Fu's face, causing everyone to be stunned. They were all at a loss and didn't know what he was so excited about. Under the gazes of the crowd, a handsome young man wearing a black windbreaker, who was as ethereal as an immortal, slowly walked in with a calm expression on his face. In his embrace was a little girl with large eyes. Her small face that was as white as ice crystals was filled with curiosity. Just as he walked into the hall, his gaze paused on Xian Fu, whose face was suddenly filled with excitement after seeing him. He then looked at the many strange gazes and laughed dryly. "Big brother Xian Fu, that? I understand everything. I don't dare to promise you anything. I can only say that I will do my best." The air froze for 2 seconds. Everyone in the Xian family frowned slightly. The middle-aged man also faintly glanced at Yin Nuoxing. His eyes revealed traces of astonishment. Just as he was about to say something, Xian Fu covered his mouth. The latter hurriedly smiled and said, "Hee, thank you for your help. Xian Fu will first thank you here. And is there anything else you want to tell me? If there isn't, I want to go take a look at the venue first." Yin Nuoxing nodded. His gaze was somewhat unnatural as he looked directly at Xian Fu. The gazes that shot over from every corner made his forehead sweat. The middle-aged man glanced at Xian Fu and then looked at Yin Nuoxing. Just as he was about to say something, Xian Fu hurriedly said, "There isn't anything special to say. If little brother has something important to say, you don't have to pay attention to us." "All right, Xingyu Plaza, right? I will go 3 days later." Hurriedly nodding his head. Yin Nuoxing also couldn't stand the gazes of the crowd. A brighter ray suddenly appeared under his feet. In a flash, he carried yin nuashing and fled gu. Everyone's eyes were wide open as they stared at the entrance. Even a middle-aged man suddenly stood up. His eyes were filled with shock as he looked at the entrance. He didn't come back to his senses for a long time. Immortal stage expert. The middle-aged man's cry of surprise caused a few people in the hall to suck in a breath of cold air. Immortal stage expert. How old was he? And he was already an immortal stage expert. Second uncle. You know him? The hall cooled down for a few seconds. Xianming was the first to react and shouted at Xianfu. Ecstasy surged in his heart. They wouldn't mistake that dense and pure immortal energy. That was definitely a genuine immortal stage expert. If he could help, then perhaps the situation would be reversed 180 degrees. However, while he was excited, he couldn't help but bitterly laugh in his heart. Yin Nuashing's age was only 16 or 17. She was about the same age as his third sister, but she stepped into the immortal stage before him. Second brother, he is? After a moment, the middle-aged man also reacted. His gaze abruptly turned to Xian Fu as he hurriedly asked. The moment Yin Nuashing disappeared, he could clearly sense the faint aura that leaked out. It was definitely immortal energy. Moreover, it wasn't mixed with origin energy. Seeing everyone looking at him with surprise and confusion, Xian Fu couldn't help but smile. Then, he slowly recounted the events of that day. I didn't expect it. When the middle-aged man finished listening, he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. He couldn't help but rub his palms together. His face, which had always been calm, revealed a hint of joy for the first time. However, this joy also contained some astonishment. A 16 or 17-year-old immortal stage expert. This was simply a monster. Xianming, who was at the side, couldn't help but bitterly laugh after hearing this. Where did this monster come from? His talent wasn't something that a human could possess. The joy lasted for a moment, but the middle-aged man suddenly withdrew his smile. After muttering to himself for a moment, he inexplicably let out a long sigh, causing everyone to be startled. The information on their faces also slightly converged as they looked at the former. Big brother. Xian Fu was startled. He didn't know why he suddenly sighed. No, I suddenly thought that this matter involves too many things. Not to mention the Shuang family's large business in Star Universe City. This time, there's also the water god temple behind Shuangya. Rashly pulling him into this matter, wouldn't it be a bit inappropriate? The middle-aged man said softly. Hearing this, Xian Fu was also startled. Although Yin Nuashing said that he understood the matter, he didn't know if he knew how much deterrence the water god temple had to them. When the day comes, we'll ask him again. If possible, I still hope that a young man with such talent won't participate in our complicated dispute. Tapping his finger on the table, the middle-aged man pondered for a moment before saying in a deep voice, Now is not the time to relax. Everyone, prepare yourselves. Yes. When the Xian family heard this, they hurriedly responded. Naturally, Yin Nuashing didn't know their worries. Even if he knew, he could only smile bitterly. He really wasn't worried that the water god temple would settle accounts with him. Since there were still 3 days, Yin Nuashing wasn't in a hurry. This time, it was rare that he didn't need to prepare anything. It was a battle between an immortal rank and a bunch of mortal rank and half-immortal rank. No matter how strong the latter was, they were only mortal rank and half-immortal rank. There was a huge gap between them and the immortal rank, unless they were like Yin Nuashing and had 18 kinds of divine weapons. Of course, in the worst-case scenario, unless the Shuang family could invite a young god, Yin Nuashing really didn't need to pay too much attention to them. And looking at the Shuang family, it seemed that they couldn't afford to invite such a legendary expert. 6 wings spread out, bringing a gust of wind. His figure appeared in the sky directly. After identifying the direction, he flew towards a square. Yin Nuashing wanted to take a look at Xingyu Square to make sure it was safe. If there were any traps there, it would be fun if he was ambushed. Looking at Shuangya's appearance, he didn't look like a straightforward person. He couldn't rule out the possibility that he was ambushed. He wasn't afraid of being ambushed in the open, but if he was ambushed in the dark, Thinking of the result of being ambushed, Yin Nuashing shuddered. He muttered in his heart, "I'd better take a look at the square first." Xingyu Square was located in the south of Xingyu City. Except for some stairs around it, there was a flat and tidy square below. The whole square was circular and was 100,000 feet in size. It was all paved with bluestones. It was originally a square used by Xingyu City to hold celebrations and other public activities. This square had existed since the establishment of Xingyu City. After so many years of wind and rain, there were no traces left on it. Of course, other than being used for celebrations, this square was also used for another purpose. For example, to resolve grievances. Whether it was public grievances or private grievances, they could be resolved here. And this time, the two biggest forces in Xingyu City were using Xingyu Square. Therefore, at this time, 3 days before the official start, the square had been cleared. No one was allowed to enter, and there were even guards at the door. It seemed that some people were worried about the situation that Yin Nuashing was worried about, so they cleared the square early. It seems that the Shuang clan is planning to hold a celebration directly. Floating in the air, Yin Nuashing looked down at the square below and couldn't help but sneer. Since Xingyu Square was used to hold public activities like celebrations, then could it be understood that a moment ago, the sky was turned upside down and the earth was turned upside down, and the next moment, the sky was covered with lanterns and banners, and the people were running around to tell each other the good news? A public blow and a psychological blow. How deep was the enmity between them to do such a thing? Moreover, on the day of the official start, there would definitely be a lot of people coming to watch. The result here would be immediately transmitted to the major forces in the city. It could be said that one victory would allow one to ascend to heaven, and one defeat would cause one to fall into the abyss. They were hovering between heaven and hell. Let's go down and check it out first. He smiled and shook his head. His 6 wings were folded behind his back like a screen, and his body fell down in free fall. When he was not far from the ground, he suddenly spread his 6 wings and flapped them a few times, setting off gusts of strong wind, completely offsetting the inertia brought by Yun Nua's fall. Only then did he stop, and his feet slowly stuck to the ground. Just as her feet touched the ground, Yin Nuashing suddenly felt the water elements in her body inexplicably churning, but they quickly calmed down. Although they calmed down, they seemed to be more active, ready to rush out of her body. This vague feeling made Yin Nuashing stare blankly for a moment. She looked at the ground, then slowly closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were flashing with 5 different colors. The situation in her line of sight also changed with the opening of the evil spirit eye. The world was dyed with a riot of colors. Red fire elements, blue water elements, and the largest light and wind elements were bright gold and green. At this moment, the entire ground was reflected in Yun Nuashing's eyes. It was a blue color that contained endless water elements. It can't be that there's really something strange, right? Seeing the situation in her line of sight, Yun Nuashing couldn't help but mutter. Although she was only guessing, she wasn't so sure. After all, the Shuang family and the other 2 families held the greatest advantage, so there shouldn't be a need for them to do this. However, it seemed that she was overthinking it. That's enough. Even this is a trick. Do you have any sportsmanship? Yin Nuashing lightly sighed. She raised her right hand, and the water elements above her palm condensed into an azure blue ball the size of a head. Then, she casually threw it out. She didn't use soul power or immortal chi to control it. Instead, she let the water elements resonate with each other. The azure blue ball of water left her hand and spun in the air, then quickly flew into the distance. Seeing this, Yin Nuashing raised her eyebrows and gave a strange smile. She jumped a few times and followed. The ball of water stopped in the center of the plaza. It extended into a thin line of water and spiraled into the ground below. Then, the ball of water actually emitted a faint light. A strange feeling slowly rose in Yun Nuashing's perception, as if it was connected to something. It seems like there really is something. Sensing this strange feeling, Yun Nuashing tilted her head and laughed. She bent her palm slightly and pointed it at the ground where the water elements extended. A strong suction force exploded from her palm, but the limestone floor underground didn't move at all. Smashing it open seems a little suspicious. Seeing that the limestone floor didn't move, Yun Nuoxing wanted to smash it open. However, she felt that if she made a hole in the ground, it would generally be a little suspicious, right? Well, who cares? However, this concern only appeared for less than 3 seconds. As soon as he finished speaking, a thin sword suddenly appeared in Yun Nuoxing's hand, and then he fiercely stabbed it into the seam between the floorboards, cutting along the seam, splashing out some mud, and then he used his strength to lift up the entire floorboards and casually threw it to the side. Looking at the brown soil below, she bent her palm slightly and a strong suction force exploded from her palm. She sucked out a handful of moist soil and threw it to the side. Looking at the moist soil, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but shake her head. She moved her palms continuously and threw out handfuls of moist soil. In just a short moment, she had dug a hole that was several feet deep. The next time she sucked, she pulled out a trident. Rich water elements curled around the trident. The trident was 7 feet long and was dark blue in color. There wasn't much soil on the trident's body. The water elements wrapped around the trident like a stream of water, washing away the soil on the trident. It fell to the ground with a squeak. TSK, TSK. Little Star can casually find a magic grade weapon when she's searching for treasure. I really don't know if you're lucky or something else. When the trident appeared, Ziye's smiling voice quietly sounded in Yun Nuoxing's mind. She couldn't help but be startled. It's only a magic grade weapon. I have a bunch of divine weapons on me. Ziye casually reported the grade of the trident. In the end, Yun Nuoxing curled her lips and said indifferently. However, that was indeed the case. Any weapon she casually took out was a divine grade weapon. This trident that seemed very high grade to others was indeed a street stall item in her eyes. Be content. Do you think that divine grade weapons are cabbages? The kind that can be found all over the streets? The divine body of the spiritual reception needs to continuously absorb things with energy to grow. This trident is a high-grade magic grade weapon. It's just enough to make up the numbers. Ziye sneered and said, I don't want it. I don't want it even if it's just to make up the numbers. I want to cultivate the divine body of the spiritual reception to its strongest state. In other words, the things it can accommodate must be of the highest quality. I'll only accept divine grade weapons. Yun Nuoxing shook her head vigorously when she heard that and rejected it. You're crazy. Ziye was stunned for a long time when he heard that. Then he opened his mouth and said those 3 words. Then there was no more sound. What kind of cosmic joke was this? How many energy-rich items did the divine body of the spiritual reception need to absorb to reach great success? He actually said that he could only absorb divine weapons? Me too. Sigh. Although I won't absorb it, it's good to keep it. It might be useful in the future. I don't have a weapon with such rich water element energy in my arsenal. Seeing that Ziye had stopped moving, Yun Nuoxing smiled and kept the trident in her pendant. Then, she filled the hole and covered the limestone floor. After casually patting it, Yun Nuoxing kept the water element energy. She looked at the floor that was exactly the same as when she came in with satisfaction. The corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up into a happy smile. This trident should be the weapon or magical weapon of the older generation of the Shuang family. It was buried here to increase the abundance of the water element energy in the air. It could increase the combat power of people who had water elements. Unfortunately, Yun Nuoxing saw it and took it away. Thinking of those old fellows who were in so much pain that they wanted to die, the corners of Yun Nuoxing's mouth curled up even more. After all, magic-grade weapons were already considered the most precious treasures of some small forces. It would be very painful to lose it just like that. Serves you right. Laughing in schadenfreude, Yun Nuoxing's figure trembled and disappeared on the spot. Chapter 199. After leaving Xingyu Square, Yun Nuoxing was free. Now that he had nothing to do, the last of his worries were gone. He had gotten a magic weapon just by walking around casually. It was really awesome. After taking away the trident, the water elemental energy that filled the square weakened and returned to normal. It no longer had any effect on water elemental users. Only now could it be said to be a fair competition. Of course, this competition was not fair to begin with. However, there was nothing he could do about it. Since the Shuang family could join forces with the other two families to drag down the Xian family could also find someone to destroy the other three families. Since Yin Nuoxing had nothing to do, the two of them strolled around Xingyu City leisurely. They ate from the street to the end of the street. Seeing the smile on Ming's little face, Yin Nuoxing also smiled. The worry of separation slowly faded away. Until now, he was a little glad that there was someone by his side. He was not alone. They strolled around the city aimlessly. Holding Ming's hand, they wandered around the streets and alleys. Unknowingly, they came to a forest. It was midsummer. Pink petals were flying all over the sky, like fairies chasing each other. The peach trees swayed in the breeze, emitting a pleasant fragrance that permeated the entire forest. The path they walked on was covered with a thick layer of red petals. Under the sunlight, the pink light reflected on the entire forest, making it look hazy and dreamy. The falling petals are not heartless. They turn into spring mud to protect the flowers. Seeing this scene, Yin Nuoxing suddenly recited, "The red peach contains the rain of the night. The green willow brings the mist of spring. Brother, you're thinking too much. It's not raining here, and the peach blossoms are not stained by the rain." Just as Yin Nuoxing was being poetic, Ming smiled and tugged at the corner of his clothes. "Why are you as emotionless as your sister Yuan?" Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment when she was suddenly interrupted. Then, she smiled bitterly and rubbed Ming's head with her palm, causing the latter to mumble continuously. Shaking his head, Yin Nuoxing didn't say anything else. He walked quietly in the peach blossom forest. The breeze blew by from time to time, causing his long hair to fall in front of him. He opened his mouth slightly and bit on a strand of hair. He closed his eyes gently and stood quietly in the forest with Ming, enjoying the comfort and peace of this moment. A gentle breeze blew against her body. It was a little cool, and the sound of the wind seemed to carry a special melody that was not inferior to the music played by the strings. At this moment, Yin Nuoxing felt that her state of mind had never been so calm. She was so calm that she wanted to fall asleep at this moment. Shaking her head to clear her mind, Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. She was actually intoxicated. What was she trying to do? Even the music of the strings didn't make her intoxicated. Would the sound of the wind blow her away just like that? It's a pity that Sister Yuan isn't here. I really want her to see it too. Yin Nuoxing shook her head and smiled bitterly. She lifted her feet and held Ming's hand as they shuttled through the winding path. Ming looked at the scenery around him excitedly. It was as if he had never seen such a beautiful scene before. His little hand gently broke free from Yin Nuoxing's hand, and he jumped and ran happily in the forest. His lively appearance made Yin Nuoxing laugh uncontrollably. Her eyes were filled with gentleness. Rustle. Just as Yin Nuoxing was about to catch up to Ming, a rustling sound suddenly came from behind. It attracted Yin Nuoxing's attention, and she couldn't help but turn around. 10 meters away from her, an especially huge peach tree stood there quietly. It was much bigger than the peach trees around it, and it was several times thicker. It was like the king of the peach trees. Deep red peach blossoms were in full bloom, covering the branches of the entire tree. As the breeze blew, the peach blossoms filled the sky, and it was as if a deep red snow had fallen. On one of the very wide branches of this peach tree, a beautiful figure slowly sat up. She stretched lazily like a kitten. Her perfect curves were wrapped in a purple and gold dress, and her long purple hair was like satin, curling up on the branches. At this moment, Yin Nuoxing was actually stunned. He had seen many beautiful girls, and each of them had their own unique style. They were all beautiful and moving. There was the playful and cute Yuan, the gentle and moving Xianyin, and the eccentric and lively Ziyi. He thought that he wouldn't be surprised to see any other girls, but at this moment he was stunned. The girl was no more than 15 or 16 years old. She was wearing a purple and gold dress, and her graceful and delicate figure was vividly outlined by the close-fitting dress. Her pair of snow-white jade arms were propped up on the branches, and she looked up. Her delicate face was filled with a languid expression. Her bright red cherry lips were tender and alluring, and crimson flower petals were circling around her body. The scene was so beautiful that it was captivating. Bits of sunlight gently stuck to her body, and her entire body seemed to be wrapped in a faint holy light, as if she was wearing a thin layer of golden gauze. She was sacred and inviolable, like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world. Because she had just woken up, her sleepy and confused appearance made her look even more charming and moving. Gulp. Yin Nuoxing widened his eyes and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He had always been a reserved person, but he actually felt a little reluctant to look away. He wanted to take a few more glances at the girl, afraid that he wouldn't have another chance if he missed this one. The girl was dazed for a while, and her snow-like jade hands that reflected the sunlight gently rubbed her sleepy eyes. Mei Mao gently flapped her fan and calmed herself down. Suddenly, she felt a burning gaze glued to her, and she couldn't help but turn her head. She saw that not far away, Yin Nuoxing was staring at her. She was also stunned. Their eyes met, and space and time seemed to freeze at this moment. After a long time, the girl was the first to react. She looked a little flustered, and her jade hands pushed against the branches as if she wanted to stand up. In the end, because of her panic, her palms tilted and gently brushed against the void. She lost her balance and fell straight to the ground. "Be careful." Awakened by the girl's actions, Yin Nuoxing reacted. The next thing he saw was the girl falling from the tree. He immediately shouted, and the light element uncontrollably broke out of his body and carried him forward. In the blink of an eye, he rushed to the bottom of the tree. Just as he reached out his hand, the girl's soft and delicate body fell into his arms, so light, so soft. This was Yin Nuoxing's first thought. At this moment, he suddenly became a little absent-minded. He looked at Mei Mao in his arms, and the girl's slender eyelashes were trembling slightly. Observing her at such a close distance, his heart suddenly tightened, and his entire body trembled. The expected pain didn't come. Instead, a warm feeling spread from her jade legs and back, causing the girl to be stunned for a moment. She gently opened her eyes, and her deep purple pupils met Yin Nuoxing's pitch-black eyes that contained a hint of purple. Two delicate blushes suddenly appeared on her unbelievably beautiful face. Her cherry lips opened slightly and trembled slightly. That frightened look looked even more adorable and moving. Seeing the girl's shy look, Yin Nuoxing fiercely bit the tip of his tongue to recover from the state of losing his soul. Then, he hurriedly helped the girl up and took a step back. He scratched his head in embarrassment and tried to move his eyes away. However, he realized that those damned eyes were tightly glued to her body and couldn't move away. Seeing the girl blushing and lowering her head, Yin Nuoxing laughed dryly and asked dryly, That, are you all right?" Hearing this, the girl hurriedly shook her head. Mei Mao looked at Yin Nuoxing in panic and hurriedly lowered her head again. Her slender hands were uneasily intertwined. After a long while, she bowed to him and stammered, Thank you." Just as she finished speaking, the girl felt a little dizzy. She immediately turned around and ran. Her little feet quickly tapped on the petals on the ground, leaving behind a melodious sound that sounded like a zither and a pipa playing in unison. It sounded like 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix. She disappeared into the peach blossom forest. "My name is Zian." Staring blankly at the place where the girl disappeared, Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt a little disappointed. His chest felt as if it was being squeezed tightly. His heart that had been sealed in ice for many years, like an ancient well that had no ripples, was actually surging with perilous waves. A feeling that he had never felt before seemed to be overflowing in his heart. This strange feeling gave him a fright. He hurriedly shook his head and patted his face with both hands. Then he touched his chest and softly said, "Everything is fine." He took a deep breath and was about to turn around and leave when he saw a jade pendant by his feet. After being stunned for a moment, Yin Nuoxing picked up the jade pendant. The jade pendant was only half the size of his palm. It was cold to the touch and seemed to be something that the girl always kept close to her body. A faint fragrance wafted into his nose, causing his mind to be uncontrollably shaken. On one side of the jade pendant, the word Xian was engraved. On the other side, the word Xian was engraved. It seemed that the girl had added it herself. Xian? She's from the Xian family? Which Xian family? When he first saw the word Xian, Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment before he muttered to himself. He knew that there were only two Xian families. One was the Xian family of the 8 great ancient families, and the other was the Xian family of Xingyu City. After pondering for a long time, he solemnly put the jade pendant back into the pendant. He had a premonition that they would definitely meet again. Xian, Xian, Xian. After muttering this name a few times, Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt that unknown emotion surging into his heart again. He was so frightened that he hurriedly shook his head. He himself didn't know that the gentle smile at the corner of his mouth was something that he had never seen before. Little star, you're tempted. If you want that girl, you have to seize the opportunity. Seeing Yin Nuoxing's strange expression, Zai finally couldn't help but laugh in his heart. This sudden voice caused the uneasy Yin Nuoxing to stumble and almost fall. What? What's tempting? Hearing Zai's sudden voice, Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment and asked in confusion. Hearing his answer, Zai was stunned. After a moment, he thought of something and couldn't help but mutter in his heart. Is this guy a block of wood? Thinking of this, Zai suddenly felt very speechless. After a moment, he said, "You're tempted." The so-called tempted means, do you feel a little disappointed right now? Also, your heart is beating very fast and your face is red? Yin Nuoxing touched his chest and cheeks to feel for a moment before nodding a little. Think about how she looks like again. How do you feel? Zai asked slowly. A little happy and expectant. Yin Nuoxing took a step back and laughed dryly. So? This is a normal reaction, right? What does this mean? Because in the past, when I was hugged by Xian Yin or Yin, this would happen. His heart was in a mess, and even his mind was slow. Yin Nuoxing did not understand anything at this moment. Originally, he was so smart that he boasted that he could see the sun, moon, stars, and everything in the world, but now, he could not even continue to think. You sigh? Think about it now. When you were hugged by Yuin or Xianin, did you feel happy? Ziyi sighed and scolded him for being a blockhead, pointing it out. No. Yin Nuoxing thought for a moment and shook her head. It was a warm feeling, just like hugging a family member. To be more specific, it should be relaxing. Expectant. I don't think so. She continued to shake her head. That's right. Little star, you tempted. Tempted. Do you know that you're tempted? So I took a deep breath and suddenly roared. What? What's tempted? Yin Nuoxing was so frightened by the roar that he shrank back. He tilted his head and took a step back. He was about to lean against the peach tree behind him. After Ziyi continued speaking, he seemed to have understood something, but he seemed to be a little resistant. He didn't want to know. F***CK? You block of wood. Big block of wood. Emotional idiot. Zai was so angry that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. He couldn't help but rush out of Yin Nuoxing's body. For the first time, he appeared on his own. His purple robe fluttered in the wind, and then he plunged into Yin Nuoxing's embrace. She hugged him tightly with her jade hands and snuggled into his embrace like Xianin. Yin Nuoxing leaned against the tree after being hit by the warm and fragrant jade. Her crimson petals fell. She looked at Zai in her embrace, and her face instantly became fiery red. She didn't know what to do with her hands and didn't know what to do this. Zai, what are you doing so suddenly? Yin Nuoxing gently struggled, but couldn't break free from this firm embrace. She could only give up struggling and laugh bitterly. She didn't understand why Zai was acting a little strange today. How is it? Do you feel anything? Zai raised his head and looked at Yun Nuashing. He asked, "It's the feeling you had when you saw her." He seemed to know that Yun Nuashing wouldn't understand, so he added, "What's the difference between the feeling you had when you saw her just now?" I felt a little confused just now. I didn't feel that kind of anticipation or happiness." Yun Nuashing blushed and frowned. She thought seriously for a moment and hesitated for a while before replying. "That's more like it." Zai nodded fiercely and took a step back. He slapped Yun Nuashing's cheeks with both hands and held her face. He shouted words that made Yun Nuashing feel like she was struck by lightning. "You, love, you." Chapter 200. Time froze, space froze, and the crimson petals that filled the sky stopped at the moment they brushed past Yun Nuashing's face. The sound of the wind disappeared, and there was no sound of breathing or heartbeat. After a while, the frozen scene started moving again. The petals hit Yun Nuashing's face, and the gentle touch pulled him back to reality. Seeing the serious oval face in front of him, his eyes twitched, and he laughed dryly. "Ahaha, how strange. Zai's actually joking with me. Ha ha ha, I won't admit it. I'm talking to you very seriously, do you know that?" Seeing Yun Nuashing feigning ignorance, Zai sighed helplessly. It seemed that he wouldn't be able to react to this result for a while. "Don't say any more." "But you're telling me I fell in love at first sight?" "Haha, how is that possible? I've never liked anyone before, and I don't think I will in the future. How could I fall in love with someone so easily? What do you think?" Yun Nuashing held his head and laughed like he was having a seizure. However, only Zai could tell that his laughter was very fake. After removing layer after layer of packaging, all that was left was panic, as if he didn't understand this feeling of being reborn and didn't know how to face it. "I know, little star, I know you're feeling very complicated right now, but at least you have to face your feelings head on. Furthermore, being in love is the best time in life. It's a bit of a waste of your youth if you don't experience it." Zai sighed, stood on his tiptoes, and patted his head with his slender hand. His gentle words suppressed his churning emotions. "But youth is fleeting and beauty is fleeting. Even a cultivator's life is just a passing moment. At the very least, you have to leave behind some memories that make you happy. Cultivators also have their moments of youth." Zai sighed. "That has nothing to do with me. But it's so strange. There's suddenly a feeling in my heart. It's like joy, but it's also like worry." Yun Nuashing leaned weakly against the tree behind her. She hugged her arms and looked up at the sky with unfocused eyes. She muttered, "I can't calm my heart. I can't calm my heart. No, it can't be." Yun Nuashing sighed and grabbed his chest with his hand. His originally calm heart was beating restlessly at this moment. It was beating at an abnormally fast speed, causing his entire body to feel a little hot. After all, it's a newly born emotion. You'll get used to it. In the future, you'll feel how much joy it brings you. Don't think too much about it now. The next time you see her, you'll understand your own feelings." Ziyi tilted her head and gently stroked his face with her hand, smiling sweetly. "It's not like that, but I understand." After Ziyi finished speaking, she plunged into Yun Nuashing's arms. Her delicate body surged with purple light, and in just a moment, she turned back in her flame form and entered Yun Nuashing's body, leaving him alone to feel a sense of loss. "I like her. No, it can't be possible." After taking 2 light breaths, Yun Nuashing looked at the indigo blue sky. When he thought of how cute the girl was like a panicked deer just now, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up, and it gradually widened. His heart was resisting this emotion. It was as if there were shackles that firmly locked this newly born emotion at the bottom of a well. A gentle breeze blew past and blew Yun Nuashing's long hair. However, it couldn't disperse his inexplicable emotions. "Big brother." Just as he was in a daze, Ming Ming bounced back from the edge of the forest. In his hand was a peach blossom branch that was in full bloom. He plunged into Yun Nuashing's embrace and waved the peach blossom in front of him a few times. Ming's actions pulled Yin Nuoxing back from his daydreaming. He lowered his head and couldn't help but smile. He hugged Ming dotingly and took the peach blossom. He tied up her long hair and inserted the peach blossom into her hair. He smiled and looked at her for a while before nodding. "Let's go." He carried Ming and slowly walked out of the peach blossom forest. When he was about to leave, he couldn't help but look back at the trees and the ground. In the end, he let out a soft sigh that was filled with countless complicated emotions. It floated faintly in the air and slowly dissipated. Cold and heartless. You are the incarnation of the night, the shadow of the Demon King. You sealed your own emotions. What's trapped in that shell is only a gray soul. You cut off your own shackles and cut off a part of yourself. Even your heart has frozen. You are already a dead person, struggling at death's door in the cold and heartless darkness. A monster like you wants to control your own emotions? It abandoned you when you abandoned it. It was as if he was in an endless darkness, and cold air surrounded him from all directions. In the darkness, Yin Nuoxing felt as if there were countless pairs of eyes staring at him. There was a hint of helplessness in their eyes, as well as some shouts filled with hatred. They surged towards him from afar like a tidal wave. That impact made him feel a heartless and cold presence, and his consciousness slowly weakened in this tidal wave. "Where is this? I seem to have been here before," Yin Nuoxing murmured softly. It was the same coldness, the same darkness, and the same suffocating feeling. He had experienced this before. Yes, it was in Yuyan City. In the Song of Death, he had felt the same cold darkness. It was the darkness that seemed to deprive him of his five senses. But something's not right. His drooping eyelids slowly opened. Yin Nuoxing raised his head and took a deep breath. He muttered in his heart, "This is my dream." The cold and invisible darkness was blurry. He had also felt this kind of atmosphere in his dream in Yuyan City. The fire that filled the sky burned down the entire city. There, he felt as if he was being judged. "Monster! Monster!" Yin Nuoxing silently said these two words. Unexpectedly, when he heard these two words, he didn't feel disgusted at all. His heart was abnormally calm. The corner of his mouth even curled up into a smile. Whatever. A monster is a monster. Emotions. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh. Once emotions are severed, the body is heartless. Who am I? A monster? Yin Nuoxing? It doesn't matter. Purple night. Yin Nuoxing suddenly roared out. The vast and mighty sound waves rippled in the dark space, causing his head to hurt a little. This was his dream. Wantonly disturbing the dream was no different from stirring up his spirit. The sound waves rapidly spread out like a tiger's roar, causing ripples in the darkness. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and looked around. However, he didn't see the figure that he had imagined. He couldn't help but laugh at himself. This was his dream. How could Purple Night enter? Just as he shook his head and laughed at himself, the space in front of him gently rippled, startling him. When he came back to his senses, he saw a girl with an exquisite oval face standing in front of him. She was rubbing her sleepy eyes. Her long hair was slightly fluffy, and she was wearing cute pajamas. She was yawning loudly as if she had just been sleeping. Seeing that Purple Night had really come out, Yin Nuoxing was also stunned. He had just shouted casually. After rubbing his eyes for a long time, Purple Night finally woke up. He was still holding a long pillow in his hand. He stared at Yin Nuoxing with a resentful expression. He looked as if he wanted to eat him alive. "What? Can't you let me rest in the middle of the night? Do you believe that I'll go on strike?" Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing laughed dryly and quickly said, "Look here, what's there to see? You called me into your dream." Ziya's face was filled with displeasure as she muttered to herself and turned her head. Looking at the endless darkness, a mixture of hatred and helplessness rushed into her mind. Even her expression changed several times in an instant. He quickly shook his head and composed himself. His expression was a little surprised. "This is the sea of consciousness? Why do you have this thing in your mind?" "Sea of consciousness? What's that?" Yin Nuoxing was stunned. He did feel a huge wave of consciousness invading his mind. However, Perhaps it was just as the previous voices had said. He could only feel it, but was not affected. The sea of consciousness. It's the sea of consciousness. It's an ocean formed by melting the consciousnesses of countless people. Thousands of thoughts condensed into one. That's everyone's thoughts, fill it. Those who are tainted by the sea of consciousness will eventually become a part of the sea. Purple Knight said in a low voice. This is my dream. I don't know why either. Yin Nuoshing shook his head. He looked straight at Purple Knight and said, Look at my memories. I've had such a dream before. I want to know the conditions and reasons that triggered it. Also, look at the deepest part and deduce, who am I? Those faint purple eyes seemed to light up like a lamp. Purple Knight turned around and saw those eyes. Her bright eyes blinked slightly, then she nodded heavily. She held Yin Nuoshing's head with both hands and looked straight into his eyes. 2 rays of purple light shot out from her eyes and drilled into Yin Nuoshing's eyes. When the rays of light shot into his eyes, Yin Nuoshing's head trembled slightly, then he quickly calmed down. However, his mind was in turmoil because of those 2 rays of light. Every time Purple Knight saw a scene, he would relive that scene again. Moreover, because these were memories that were dug up, his emotions when he first saw that scene would also appear. Confusion, joy, pain, heartlessness, hardship, despair. Those scenes were dug up again. It was just like that day when he ascended the Juyuan Pavilion. However, the impressions were even more ingrained in his bones. Although Purple Knight and he were of the same mind, it still took a long time for their memories to be connected. It was only the recent memories that were fine. If he had to look at the distant past, the memories that were hidden deep in his heart would probably make Yin Nuoshing feel terrible. However, these hidden memories also included memories that he didn't know about. Scenes flashed across Purple Knight's bright eyes. Every inch of his memories caused Yin Nuoshing's mind to ache. Gradually, he felt as if he had returned to the very beginning, the scene that he had recalled countless times, the scene when he fell from the sky. That moment, until eternity hum. After a long while, the light in Purple Knight's eyes slowly dimmed. Then, Mei Mao closed her eyes tightly, as if she was sorting out the enormous amount of memories. Yin Nuoshing also took a step back and gently exhaled, allowing her to slowly think on her own. After a long while, Purple Knight's tightly shut eyes opened again. Unlike before, there was now some doubt in her bright eyes. She stared at Yin Nuoshing and asked, Black Dragon? Yin Nuoshing was stunned, then nodded. Purple Knight should be referring to the black dragon in the sky above the burning city. I've never seen those places before. I don't know which part of the realm of the gods it is. Purple Knight sighed softly and shook his head. Also, you don't have any deeply hidden memories. It could even be said that the beginning of your memories is the day you fell. I can't see any memories before that. As for your amnesia, I don't quite understand it now. Purple Knight sighed heavily. She tugged at her long hair in distress and continuously muttered something. I didn't lose my memories? Yin Nuoshing frowned. But that voice, that tree, Xianyin, Yin Exen, Chuan Yin, and the others, if it wasn't amnesia, then what could it be? I didn't say that you didn't lose your memories. Did you forget? The loss of your memories might be caused by the loss of your soul. Yuan also speculated that the current you might not have a complete soul. Therefore, all the memories I can see are only up to the day you were born. Knowing what Yin Nuoshing was thinking, Purple Knight gently shook his head. Then, if I retrieve the other souls, will I be able to see things that I haven't seen yet? Yin Nuoshing hurriedly asked. In theory, yes. However, the twists and turns of the soul splitting and reuniting will definitely cause the original memory to be damaged. It can be said that if your soul is reunited, the things that you remember in the end might not even be 50% complete, Purple Knight said faintly. 50%? Yin Nuoshing was shocked. Wasn't that equivalent to living half of his life in vain? No. Let's not talk about this first. What soul? Right now, there's no clue as to where my soul went. Besides, Xian Yin said. Yin Nuoshing hurriedly shook his head. You can only know everything when you have complete strength. Purple Night said immediately. Then, she looked at the boundless darkness. The darkness was so dark that it made her heart palpitate. Even though she had only seen the memories of Yin Nuashing and Yishu walking through the Song of Death, she could still feel the horror. However, this place made her feel that it was even more terrifying than the Song of Death. You want to know about this sea of consciousness, but I don't know either. Purple Night's expression was a little gloomy. This is the strangest thing I've seen in all my years of life. You're also the strangest person I've ever seen. The sea of consciousness, the sea of consciousness. After a moment, Purple Night let out a long sigh. Her long, shapely eyebrows knitted together as she muttered, "Now, I really want to ask, who are you? Why is your dreamscape so strange and chaotic? Why is there a sea of consciousness of all living beings in your dreamscape? That sea of consciousness has melted at least billions of people." Chapter 201. The Sea of Consciousness was an ocean where countless living beings had abandoned their bodies, leaving behind only their consciousnesses. In the Sea of Consciousness, all thoughts were united. Anyone who approached the Sea of Consciousness would eventually become a part of it. For countless years, it had only existed in legends and theories. No one had ever truly seen the so-called Sea of Consciousness, so much so that it was doubtful whether it even existed. However, in this place, in this darkness where nothing could be seen, Zi spoke of this invisible object that no one had ever seen before. Although it was invisible, it made people feel that it was everywhere in this darkness. The conflicting senses made Zi Ye's heart palpitate. She took a small step back and leaned against Yun Nuashing. The consciousnesses of billions of people in my dream? Does this really exist in my mind, or is it just a simulation of my dream? Yin Nuashing muttered. If it was the latter, it would be better, but if it was nestled in his head, just thinking about it gave him goosebumps. Zi turned around and looked at his calm face. She carefully looked at his eyes and finally saw the trace of uneasiness she wanted to see. She sighed softly and said, "This dream of yours and the scene in the Black Dragon's dream are filled with the consciousnesses of all living beings. Only you could withstand that enormous willpower. If it were anyone else, they would have long been corroded and become a part of the sea of consciousness. Could it be that you've really become emotionless?" Zi narrowed her eyes and turned to look at Yun Nuashing with a faint smile. Hearing this, Yun Nuashing couldn't help but chuckle. "What do you think? Living like a sentimental person. No matter how you look at it, you don't look emotionless. You look more like a sentimental person." Zi stroked her long hair and rolled her eyes. "However, I've discovered some interesting things in this sea of consciousness." Zi smiled again after a moment. "What's interesting?" Yin Nuashing turned around and saw her unusual smile. He couldn't help but be stunned. His brows naturally twitched a few times. He felt that there was something wrong with this smile, some legends about the realm of the gods. "Do you want to take a look?" Zi smiled sweetly. Her smile was filled with temptation, making her look even more beautiful. However, it made Yin Nuashing roll his eyes. How could he still get up after jumping into this place? "Don't worry." Zi revealed a reassuring smile and said, "This legend is known to all. Even the common people know about it. I just want to see it again." "Stop. There's someone here who doesn't know." Yin Nuashing raised her hand, then pointed at herself and laughed. Seeing this, Zi was a bit speechless, but thinking about it, it made sense. This guy had even forgotten who he was, so how could he remember those legends? With an earth-shattering boom, a brand new world was born in the 8 primordial realms. It was as if a zone of life had been opened up in the chaotic and violent magma. At that time, the new world did not have a name. It was just a flat world whose size was difficult to measure. This new world was filled with spatial folds. It operated in a different way from all the other worlds. All the stars revolved around this new world, as if this flat world was the center of all the stars. This new world, which had all the conditions for life to flourish, was also the masterpiece of the first generation of gods. It was as if it was trying to make up for the slow evolution of the 8 primordial realms. With the passage of time, life gradually evolved. In this new world, life was also born. The life born in other places of the 8 primordial realms also changed with time. After tens of millions of years, the human race of the 8 primordial realms appeared. The river of time flowed endlessly. The special environment of the 8 primordial realms made the intelligent creatures here powerful. All the creatures here were countless times more powerful than the creatures in the lower realm. The talents of the ancestors and their divine power were the talismans for them to live in this chaotic land. They used this power to constantly open up the void, create a land of life, and accelerate the evolution of the 8 primordial realms. Finally, after an epoch, some people accidentally came to this new world. The first group of visitors felt the almost endless power that was close to the origin of the world. They were very surprised and sent this information back to their birthplace. Many years later, they took tens of millions of their clansmen and settled in the New World. They became the first group of residents of the New World and stayed there to reproduce. Because the New World was too big, their life activities only occupied a small area, and they couldn't affect the evolution of life in the New World. The first generation of gods just watched them quietly and didn't expel them. The first group of people who visited the New World also became famous super experts because of the special environment there. They were the gods and spirits that we're talking about today. They believed that this world was the masterpiece of the gods, a gift that the gods had given to this world. Seeing that these experts were everywhere in this new world, they also gave it a name, the World of Gods. Although it was called world, it was not a primordial realm. It was just because of its prosperity and uniqueness that it was crowned as world. As for the first generation of gods in the great primordial realm, they wandered outside of all the worlds, silently watching the natural operations of the 8 primordial realms. They did not care about the affairs of the world. No one had seen them before, and no one knew them. The world continued to move forward quietly under their protection. However, on the other side, everyone knew of their existence. Everyone could sense their existence. The divine power that flowed in every corner of the world told the world their story. This was the beginning of the great primordial realm, the legend of the creation of the world of gods. Images flashed and appeared in his mind. The kind and faint narration slowly told him the legend, as if it was a story. It was a spacious hall filled with short tables. At the front of the hall, an indistinct figure sat cross-legged. The long-winded narration of the legend came from him. At the table below, Yin Nuashing and Zi Yi rested their cheeks on their hands. They rested their elbows on the table as they patiently listened to the person speak word by word. It seemed to be a school, but it was too empty. There was not a single person in it, and only the storyteller was giving a speech alone. The person's appearance was also a blurry white. One could see his white hair fluttering in the wind, but his face was bright white, and it was covered by a layer of white. After a long while, when the figure finished telling the legend, Yin Nuashing stretched her back and let out a long yawn. She rubbed her eyes and said, "I feel that such a complicated legend will not be known by everyone." Zi rolled her eyes at her as she rubbed her sore wrist. She opened the ancient book on the table and glanced at it casually. She said indifferently, "But in reality, if you ask a child, he will be able to tell you the main points. The main point is to let you know that such a thing happened in the past." Zi flipped the ancient book over. When Mei Mao saw the contents of the ancient book, she could not help but tremble slightly. This is also the last legacy of the era of myths and legends. Everything in the past was gradually destroyed in the long river of history, including the first generation of gods, the first generation of great deity. Did such a legendary figure really exist? Yin Nuashing frowned and said, "I feel that the so-called legend is just a rumor. Rumor after rumor. It will be infinitely exaggerated in the end, right? As the saying goes, 3 men become a tiger or something." You are seriously paranoid. Almost no one has ever doubted this matter. Since ancient times, I'm afraid that you are the only one who dares to question this matter." Hearing this, Z rolled her eyes in annoyance. She glanced at the person who was still sitting cross-legged in front of the hall. Then, she looked at Yin Nuoxing and said, "The first generation of gods really existed. The protection they left behind for the great Yuan realm is the best proof of their existence. These trivial matters, since ancient times, who knows how many gods and deities have verified them." "Protection? What protection?" Yin Nuoxing scratched her head. "This." Ziyi was stunned. Her cherry lips were halfway open, but she paused. She did not utter a single word. Her sluggish look made it seem as if her brain had suddenly short-circuited. Even Yin Nuoxing was stunned. After a while, Ziyi frowned and sighed. "I don't remember. When I was sealed, I could feel that many of my memories were erased. There aren't many things that I remember. After 60 years, I almost forgot what he looked like." Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing suddenly remembered that when she was talking to Ziyi, the latter seemed to have said, "Those gods are all acting mysterious." Ziyi, as previous master, seemed to have said something to her, and Xianyin seemed to have said something to him as well. However, he had forgotten it. He only had an extremely faint impression of it. Is the beginning of this legend the first era? Yin Nuoxing asked. Regarding this, there's always been a debate. Some people say that when the first great deity appeared, the counting of eras began. After all, this is a limit that the later generations added to time. There are also people who believe that the counting of eras began when the great primordial realm was born. However, no matter how these two methods of measurement are calculated, the difference will not exceed an era. The weight of 1,000,000,000,000 years is not something that can be spent just because one wants to. Take me, for example. Even when I was sealed, the longest deep slumber seemed to be 5 eras long, and the shortest seemed to be 1,000,000 years. However, it was more than 10 million years or 1,000,000 years. I would wake up after sleeping. At this point, Ziyi could not help but sigh. Mei Mao's voice was filled with the vicissitudes of life and exhaustion. "It's been a long time. Every time I open my eyes, all I see is that unchanging barrier. Time after time, I almost forget the feeling of speaking. The only thing that echoes in my ears is the sound of burning flames. It's so ordinary and monotonous that it drives me crazy." Yin Nuoxing fell silent. She gently raised her hand and placed it on Zi Ye's head. She gently stroked Zi Ye's long hair and turned her head to the side. She said indifferently, "Do you want a shoulder?" Zi blinked at Mei Mao and could not help but laugh out loud. "Little star, how old am I? I don't cry as much as you do. Besides, such a long time has passed. There's nothing much to talk about. It's just that when I think about it occasionally, it feels like a dream. After all, it's been 60 eras." Yin Nuoxing nodded and murmured, "Then why did you agree to it back then? Did you really willingly allow yourself to be sealed in the barrier?" Zi nodded lightly and said, "No matter what, I owe him the grace of rebirth. He's the person who gave me life. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be able to think freely, speak freely, and live freely in this dazzling and brilliant world. So, it's only logical that I have to continue waiting for 60 eras. Moreover, haven't I already made it through?" Ziya's brilliant smile made Yin Nuoxing feel a little sad. Although Ziyi did not say it, he could sense the indescribable feeling in her heart. This isn't the only legend about the mythological era. Let's continue watching. A moment later, Ziyi suddenly smiled strangely. She grabbed Yin Nuoxing and dragged him out of the classroom. The latter could only smile bitterly. When they were about to leave the classroom, they looked back. The blurry figure in the classroom was still narrating the legend without rest. It seemed like it would never stop. Chapter 202. Shuttling Through the Sea of Consciousness. Ziyi brought Yin Nuoxing around in circles, and they would always bump into a piece of memory. Every time they saw the scene start to change, the two of them would sit down obediently and look at this piece of consciousness while thinking about something. "I forgot to ask, how did you find these consciousnesses? It's pitch black here." They walked around like headless flies in a pitch black world. However, This was just Yun Nuoxing's imagination. If he looked closely, the trajectory that Ziyi led him seemed to have some pattern. However, he could not put his finger on it. It was just a feeling. Yun Nuoxing finally couldn't help but ask when he bumped into another consciousness and saw that the scene was beginning to change. In this dark place, he only felt that he had lost his sight. If it wasn't for the soft and boneless little hand in his hand, he didn't know where he would have gone. Feel it with your heart. There are fluctuations in consciousness. I only dared to jump in with you to take a look because I sensed it. Z smiled faintly. Then, she pulled him to sit down. The changing scene around them gradually stabilized. This time, the scene was a green meadow. The wind blew, causing green ripples to spread into the distance. Yun Nuoxing looked at her helplessly and sat down as well. On the green meadow, a figure slowly appeared. At this point, he had already heard a few legends from the mythological era. They were all related to the creation of the world and the birth of the Dayuan realm. Two of them were even talking about the same thing. Although there were some differences, they were similar. He looked at the blurry figure that appeared. In every consciousness, the figure was very blurry. It had long hair and a ball of light. It felt like it was the same person, but they could not see it clearly. Yun Nuoxing could not tell either. I touched the core of the world. When Yun Nuoxing and Ziyi were listening attentively, they suddenly heard the person say this. The latter almost fell to the side. Yun Nuoxing was only stunned. When he saw Ziyi's huge reaction, he was a little surprised. Before he could ask, the figure spoke again. In the empty and desolate space of a star domain, I saw it. My words will be left for the fated to hear. I can no longer escape this place, the core of the world. Hearing this, Z suddenly jumped up and grabbed Yun Nuoxing's shoulders tightly with both hands. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the blurry figure. Seeing how excited he was, even Yun Nuoxing was shocked. She quickly focused, wanting to hear what he had to say. Buzz. However, just as the two of them were eager to hear what he had to say, the space in front of them began to tremble violently. The blurry figure also began to tremble like a wave, as if it would shatter at any moment. F*CK. Upon seeing this scene, Violet Knight was first stunned, and then she couldn't help but curse. Why are you retreating now? At least wait until he's finished speaking. Finish speaking. Finish speaking. Yun Nuoxing blushed with shame when she saw her full of resentment and torrent of abuse. She tugged on Zai's sleeve and said, It'll be fine if I see it next time. Since it's in my dream, it won't run away. Next time? Z rolled her eyes and snorted softly. The sea of consciousness. I already said it's a sea. Can you find the same island in the middle of the sea? You're lucky to have stumbled into this place. And I don't even know if this sea of consciousness will appear again. Damn it, I almost heard an ancient secret. Z couldn't help but clench her little fist and lightly punch Yun Nuoxing's shoulder. It was obvious that she was very angry. The core of the world? Yun Nuoxing muttered in her heart and shook her head. Even if she asked, Z might not say it out loud. She would definitely repeat the same old lines that she had heard so many times that her ears had grown calluses. She would definitely say something about not being strong enough, and so on. As he listened to Ziye's indignant curses, he caught a glimpse of the blurry figure trembling violently and gradually turning into bubbles. The green grass also turned into ashes and disappeared. Yun Nuoxing slowly closed her eyes. A moment later, her faint purple eyes opened again. What she saw was a brown ceiling. She propped herself up with both hands and looked at Ming, who was sleeping on her stomach. Yun Nuoxing's face twitched, and she shook her head in exasperation. She took the blanket and covered her petite body. She gently got off the bed and stood in front of the window. The cool morning breeze brushed past her face, and she couldn't help but shiver. Why did these things appear in my mind? The memories that had been awakened, the people she once knew, the sea of consciousness in her mind. Yun Nuoxing felt a headache coming on as she thought about these things. Don't think too much about it. You'll find out what you need to know eventually. Let's deal with the matter at hand first. Ziya's voice calmly rang out in her mind, causing her to slowly let go of those strange and bizarre matters. She sighed softly and nodded. A moment later, A wild smile suddenly appeared on her face. She put her thumb and middle finger together on her right hand, and a faint purple flame quietly appeared. She said, "I can settle this with a snap of my fingers." Z felt that something wasn't right when he heard this. He thought for a moment and realized what she was talking about. He couldn't help but sneer and said, "I asked you to pick up girls, and you said you'd go fight. Why don't you try and see if you can take down that little girl with a snap of your fingers?" Yin Nuashing staggered. It would have been better if Yi didn't mention it. Now that Z mentioned it, a blurry dark purple figure appeared in his mind. He couldn't get rid of it and couldn't help but smile faintly. Then he quickly slapped himself. How could he be so despicable? 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. The highly anticipated battle that would determine the hegemony of Starry Universe City slowly began under the gaze of the entire city. Because it was the city's two largest forces, almost everyone wanted to run over and watch. Countless people swarmed out of the streets and gathered on the main street. Then, they uniformly turned around and walked towards the Starry Universe Square in the south of Starry Universe City. Although it was obvious that the Shuang clan was bullying them, everyone wanted to see what kind of resurrection the Xian clan, who was once the hegemony of Starry Universe City, had. On the stairs of the Starry Universe Square, there were densely packed seats. At this moment, these seats were filled with people. This time, the battle between the Xian clan and the Shuang clan really attracted countless eyes. In the 4 directions of the square, there were some very luxurious seats. These seats were only available to the famous forces in Starry Universe City. From here, the entire Starry Universe Square could be seen at a glance. At this moment, the seats on the east side were already filled with a group of people wearing blue robes. On their shoulders, the Shuang clan's emblem was dazzling under the sun. On the seats of the Shuang clan, Shuangya, whom Yin Nuashing saw that day, was lazily sitting on a chair. His elbows were propped on the armrest as he supported his head. His eyes occasionally looked towards the empty seats and the entrance of the square in the north. He could not help but shake his head with a smile. He seemed to be able to imagine himself standing in the middle of the square and announcing their victory to the entire Starry Universe City. Then, he imagined the image of the Xian clan. When everything was over, they would kneel down and beg for his forgiveness. However, he would reject them and hear the painful roars of the Xian clan. That kind of feeling was really wonderful. As time went by, more and more people gathered in the Star Universe Square. The hubbub of voices turned into a monstrous wave that rushed out like the waves of the sea. With a kind of momentum that would not stop until the square was overturned, it spread out majestically. Half of the Star Universe City could hear it clearly. When the Star Universe Square was almost full, a large group of people gradually appeared at the entrance of the square. Their appearance caused a commotion in the square. The people from the Xian clan are here. Although the Xian clan's overall strength is strong, they are at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. The 3 clans are here together. It's obvious that they want to suppress the Xian clan. How pitiful and sad. How did the once overlord of Starry Universe City end up being trampled on by others? It's said that the Shuang clan had privately found someone to negotiate with the Xian clan to stop this competition. However, they were chased out by the Xian clan. It seems that they're very confident. Amidst the whispers of the crowd, the people from the Xian clan slowly walked up to the high platform in the north and stopped at the side of the Shuang clan. "Oh, clan leader Xian, I thought you were too timid to come?" Seeing the people from the Xian clan appear, a middle-aged man who was about the same age as the clan leader from the Shuang clan did not stand up. He just laughed and said, "Clan leader Shuang, you think too much. Since the 3 clans are embarrassed to hand Starry Universe City over to us, we will accept it embarrassedly. Otherwise, others will say that we are embarrassed." Xianling glanced at him and said plainly, "I'm just afraid that the ones who leave in the end won't be the 3 clans." Hearing this, the middle-aged man laughed coldly. At the edge of the square, Yin Nuashing's figure slowly appeared. He had 2 dark circles under his eyes. It seemed that he had not rested well for the past 3 days. Until now, his head was still dizzy. He shook his head lightly and the soul-burning art silently circulated in the opposite direction. He converted some immortal chi into soul energy and got rid of the fatigue in his mind. His gaze first swept across the high platforms in the east, south, and west. Then, he stared closely at the Xian clan's high platform in the north. His body swayed, and he appeared on the Xian clan's high platform like a ghost. His body landed lightly, and no one noticed him. The first to sense Yin Nuoxing's aura was Xian Fu, Xian Ling, and the others. They quickly turned around. When they saw the person who came, Xian Fu's face was filled with joy. He quickly cupped his fists and said, "Little brother Yin, you're here." Xian Ling was about to say something when he suddenly saw Yin Nuoxing's dark circles. His mouth trembled, and he forgot what to say. "Mr. Yin, are you all right?" A faint laughter sounded in Yin Nuoxing's ears. He turned his head and saw that it was Xian Ming. At this moment, he was standing together with the girl he saw the other day. When the latter saw his dark circles, she could not help but take a few more glances. Although his face was expressionless, Yin Nuoxing was still able to catch a hint of a smile. "If you want to laugh, then laugh. You'll suffocate to death." Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. "Aren't they just dark circles? So what if I'm mentally weak?" He waved his hand and said, "There's something on my mind that affected my sleep, but it's not a big deal. Little brother, this matter involved a lot of things. It might even involve the Water Spirit Hall. Are you sure you want to help our Xian clan?" Xian Ling said calmly. Actually, when he asked this question, he was also a little nervous. Although he was kindly reminding Yin Nuoxing, he was also afraid that this one sentence would make Yin Nuoxing change her mind. It's fine. The Water Spirit Hall won't do anything to me. They're the 9 deity halls that everyone in the God realm loves and respects." Yin Nuoxing smiled indifferently. "All right, don't be so long-winded. The sooner we deal with this, the sooner I can return to the Water Spirit Hall to go into seclusion. The next time I come out might be a few years later." Xuanya said lazily. He slowly stood up and led a group of people down the stage. As they stood in the plaza, the air around them became moist. The water element on Xuanya's body seemed to carry a faint chill. Mutated elements? No wonder he's so arrogant. Sensing the white water element around Xuanya, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but take a few glances. She said with some surprise, "That's the strongest person of the Xuanya clan, Xuanya. He's now a half-immortal rank 8, similar to me. If we fight one-on-one, I won't be afraid of him. But in this competition, our Xian clan's younger generation can't compare to the 3 clans. Sooner or later, we'll be defeated." Xian Ming said faintly and couldn't help but sigh. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing also turned his head and looked at the group of young people standing behind Xian Ming and Yin Nuoxing. Many of them had reached the half-celestial stage, and they didn't look weak. There were also some people in the mortal stage who had reached the 11th level and the 10th level. However, as Xian Ming had said, there were too few of them. When Xuanya landed, his eyelids twitched slightly, but he didn't show it. He looked at the Xian clan side and smiled gently. "Those who are going to fight, come down. We'll settle this once and for all." While he was speaking, other than the Xian clan side, young people from the other 2 sides also jumped down from the square. They joined the Xuanya clan's people and formed an extremely powerful aura. They rushed towards the Xian clan's people. "Humph." Xian Ming took a step forward and his aura burst out. Faint immortal chi lingered around him. Yin Nuoxing also secretly stomped her foot. An immortal chi quietly appeared and resisted the incoming pressure. She said faintly, "A petty person intoxicated by success." Hearing Xuanya shout, everyone's eyes gathered on the Xian clan's high platform. They fixed their eyes on Xian Ming and his sister behind him, as well as the group of young people behind him. However, compared to the Xian clan's people, the Xian clan's people were indeed a lot less. They didn't even have half of the Xuanya clan's people. Xian Ming smiled slightly when he saw that the gazes of the entire place were gathered here. He waved his hand and was just about to lead his people down the tall platform when a soft, panting voice suddenly sounded from behind him, causing his actions to immediately stop. "Brother Xian Ming, wait a moment. I want to go up too." Hearing this voice, Yun Nuoxing's waist suddenly straightened. The expression on her face froze for a moment, causing her to almost forget to breathe. She turned her head stiffly. Her long purple hair fluttered behind her as she ran. Her beautiful face had a hint of determination, making her look even more heroic. Seeing this face that she had been yearning for day and night, Yun Nuoxing finally let out a long sigh of relief. Seeing this scene, Ziyi couldn't help but laugh in her heart. Your princess is here. Chapter 203. That's why. Yun Nuoxing sighed in annoyance when she heard Ziyi's teasing words. She took a step forward and hid in front of Xianling due to her position and the urgency in her heart. The purple-black figure did not notice Yun Nuoxing's existence for a moment. However, this small change did not escape the eyes of Xianling and the rest. Instantly, a few pairs of curious eyes shot towards the girl who was rushing over at top speed behind them. After which, they looked at Yun Nuoxing, who had a calm expression and did not pay any attention to him. After a moment, the girl who had rushed over caught her breath. Her jade-like hand patted her chest as a pair of sparkling eyes stared fixedly at Xianming. She said, "Brother, I want to go up as well. This matter concerns the entire Xian family. I can't stay out of it." "No, you can't even control your own strength. If you forcefully use that strength, who knows what terrifying things will happen." Xianming shook his head vigorously and refused. But Xianxian was a little anxious. She couldn't help but stomp her little feet on the ground. Her pretty face was filled with determination and anxiety. From the looks of it, it seemed that Xianming couldn't stop her. If he pressured her a little more, she might just jump off the stage. "I'm the only one from the Xian family to fight. If you have any skills, hurry up and use them. I'll go back to sleep after the fight." The sudden chuckle caused everyone to be stunned. Then, they turned their gazes towards the Xian family's platform. A young man in black was holding a little girl in his arms. His face was filled with a warm smile, and his handsome face seemed gentle and refined. Unfortunately, his eyes were black and blue, as if he had been beaten up by someone. Mei Mao looked down the stage. When she suddenly saw that person, Xianxian's jade-like hand couldn't help but tremble slightly. Then, she clenched her fists tightly. She actually didn't want to go up the stage anymore. Xianming's expression was also strange. He couldn't help but cry out softly, "Mr. Yun." The sudden appearance of Yun Nuoxing caused everyone present to be stunned for a moment. After savoring his words, their expressions instantly became strange. Some people could not help but laugh. It was obvious that they were amused by his words. Even if you're looking for a scapegoat, you should at least find a decent one, right? Frostfang glanced at Yun Nuoxing and smiled faintly. He didn't hide the disdain and contempt in his voice. Beside Shuanglong, a man in blue robes had his eyes tightly shut. There was an azure badge on his chest, and a majestic divine palace appeared within it. When Yun Nuoxing appeared, he only opened his eyes slightly and took a glance. After which, he narrowed his eyes and glanced at Yun Nuoxing. Soon after, he softly said, "This brat is very powerful. It seems like the Xian family has found a powerful helper this time. I wonder if Xuanya can defeat him?" The middle-aged man from the Xuan clan couldn't help but ask. "I don't know." The blue-clothed man lightly shook his head and said faintly, "This child's aura is very powerful. From the looks of it, he might have already come into contact with the immortal rank. On the other hand, Xuanya is still at the half-immortal rank 8. Although he cultivates many top-notch profound skills, and his battle strength is so strong that he can even fight against an immortal rank, this child cannot be underestimated. Perhaps it will be a draw." After saying this, the blue-clothed man slowly closed his eyes again. The middle-aged man sighed in relief in his heart when he heard Xianling's words. A faint cold smile appeared on his face. He was looking forward to seeing just how ugly Xianling's expression would be after the Xian family lost. If the Xian family only sent a clown to deal with this, I advise you to surrender. Shuangya lightly laughed. Meow. Hearing Shuangya's gentle and disdainful laughter, Yun Nuoxing rubbed her somewhat sore head and muttered. Her eyes were filled with anger. Soon after, under the gazes of everyone present, she raised her right hand and placed her thumb and middle finger together. In this world, people who feel good about themselves. Yun Nuoxing looked at Shuang Ye's group with a strange gaze. She faintly smiled and seemed to be talking to herself. There are so many of them. Ta! As the last word fell, her thumb and middle finger rubbed together. The crisp sound of fingers snapping spread throughout the entire place. Then, under the confused gazes of everyone present, 1,000 feet large purple flame pillar suddenly shot up into the sky without any warning under the feet of Shuangya and the rest. The purple flame pillar broke through the ground and directly swallowed Shuangya and the rest, after which it shot up into the sky. A terrifying temperature spread out, causing the clothes of the spectators nearby to spontaneously ignite with a puff sound. They were so shocked that they rolled on the ground in an attempt to extinguish the flame. Within Xingyu Square, everyone's gazes were dull as they stared at the flame pillar that shot up into the sky. The purple light shone on their dull faces. In the next moment, when everyone came to their senses, the expressions on their faces instantly changed. Some were shocked, some were terrified. Even the members of the Xian family were unable to react for a moment. Xian Fu could not help but wipe the sweat off his forehead. His eyes were bright as he stared below at the lazy-looking young man. His mouth could not help but click his tongue in praise. The flame pillar lasted for a minute. Under everyone's gazes, it slowly dissipated, leaving behind a bottomless hole. There was not a single person in sight. It seemed that Shuangya and the rest had all been annihilated by the flame pillar. It's over before it even started? Covering his mouth with his hand, Yun Nuoxing lazily yawned. He stretched out his hand and aimed at the hole. Suddenly, a strong suction force erupted. Then, dozens of figures with tattered clothes, charred bodies, and lacerated flesh floated up from the hole. They were casually thrown onto the ground. White smoke rose into the air, and the smell of burnt protein filled the air. It was also mixed with an indescribable fragrance. Yun Nuoxing could not help but laugh as he took a whiff of the smell of roasted human flesh that floated in the air. How fragrant! It's 80% cooked. When the people in the field saw Yun Nuoxing's handsome face that was brimming with a smile, they immediately shivered. That pair of eyes that were filled with innocence. In this situation, no matter how they looked at it, he looked cunning. This person was simply a demon. Yeah. The patriarch of the Shuang family was stunned for a long time. At this moment, he finally reacted. He quickly jumped off the high platform and rushed toward Shuangya, who was in the middle of the square. The blue-robed man's eyebrows twitched. His gaze shifted away from Yun Nuoxing. When he saw Shuangya's miserable appearance, he let out a long sigh. His figure flashed, and he disappeared from the spot. In the square, a figure struggled to prop himself up. Yun Nuoxing looked over in surprise. It was actually Shuangya. Perhaps it was because of the elemental mutation that he had managed to survive in such an extremely high temperature. However, at this moment, the latter's body was still charred black. There was no blood flowing out from the open wound. The calmness that he tried so hard to maintain had been completely replaced by hatred. He glared fiercely at Yun Nuoxing. Just a moment ago, he was still fantasizing about the scene of his victory. Who would have thought that in the next moment, he would be directly sent from heaven to hell, and to the 18th level? He had always carried the title of a genius. He had grown up under countless halos. When had he ever been in such a sorry state? The various kinds of gazes that shot at him from the square were like knives that cut him into pieces. To him, this was undoubtedly a kind of humiliation. The only thing he wanted to do now was to rush up and tear Yun Nuoxing into pieces. Of course, he wanted to do it, but he would never be able to do it. The middle-aged man from the Shuang family quickly rushed to Shuangya, who was struggling to sit up. He grabbed him with his palm and quickly examined him. Then, his face instantly turned gloomy. Shuangya was still breathing. The injuries in his body were extremely serious. Most importantly, 80% of his meridians were broken. There's also a faint purple flame that was constantly burning the remaining meridians. It seemed that it would not stop until it was completely burned. Beside him, the blue-robed man also quickly appeared. He placed his palm on Shuangya's pulse. A look of shock flashed across his face. He could not help but whisper, "Divine Flame, I'm still breathing. Don't put on such a gloomy face. I'm not dead." Seeing Shuang Long's gloomy face, Yun Nuoxing spread out her hands and said with a faint smile, "He's indeed not dead." Hearing this, the middle-aged man turned his cold gaze to Yun Nuoxing. He laughed angrily and said, "But his meridians are almost broken. What's the difference between this and killing him? No matter who you are, the Shuang family will not rest until you are dead." Shuang Long's resentful shout caused the starry square to gradually quiet down. Everyone was a little confused. They looked at each other and then looked at Shuang Long, who seemed to have lost his mind. They could not understand what was going on with this guy. In the starry square, unless there were special instructions, life and death were up to fate. From the looks of it, could it be that the Shuang family wanted to keep the other party here even though they had lost? Hearing Shuang Long's angry shout, Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. Then she said with some doubt, "Old man, what nonsense are you talking about? I didn't touch his meridians." Grumbling old man, "Your mouth is full of shit." Even Ming, who was in her arms, muttered softly. When everyone heard it, they wanted to laugh but tried their best to hold it in. The expressions on their faces suddenly became very funny. "Am I slandering you?" Hearing Yun Nuoxing's reply, Shuang Long was so angry that he laughed. His face was very ferocious. "Tisk." Yun Nuoxing curled her lips and did not speak anymore. There was no need to talk to some self-righteous grasshoppers. However, she also felt that it was a little strange. He did not take the initiative to destroy Shuang Ye's meridians. Logically speaking, there was no need for him to purple night flame. Suddenly thinking of the divine flame in her body, Yun Nuoxing's eyes trembled. It seemed that this was the only explanation. After all, he only used the purple night flame to burn Shuangya and did not do anything else. "Brat, give me your life." Seeing Yun Nuoxing's expression change for a moment, Shuang Long laughed sinisterly. He stomped his feet on the ground, and his body turned into a blue shadow. The distance of dozens of meters was covered in the blink of an eye. His palm contained a vast amount of water elements and carried a huge force as it slammed towards Yun Nuoxing's face. If it hit, the latter's head would definitely be chopped off. F*CK. You old bastard. You're twisting words and forcing logic. You're full of nonsense. You're shameless. You bastard. You're a dead egg. When Yun Nuoxing came back to his senses, he saw a large hand rapidly approaching him. All the hair on his body stood on end. The light elements automatically appeared, and his body quickly moved dozens of meters away. He could not help but curse while wiping off his cold sweat. If he had reacted a little slower, he would definitely have been killed. The sudden turn of events caused many people in Xingyu Square to whisper. At this moment, no one understood what had happened. From the moment Shuang Long jumped down to the moment he rushed towards Yun Nuoxing, it was only a matter of 10 seconds. Could it be that the Shuang clan wanted to use force? Although there were people in the audience who felt that it was shameless, they did not say it out loud. After all, the Shuang clan was powerful, and it was not good to offend them. "Shuang Long, what are you doing?" However, although ordinary people did not dare to say it, it did not mean that the Xin clan did not dare to stand up. The moment Yun Nuoxing stood still, Xian Fu was the first to jump down. He stood in front of the former and glared angrily at Shuang Long. After that, the Xian clan leader, Xian Ling, and the others all landed in front of him with furrowed brows. "Shuang Long, the Shuang clan has already lost this competition. According to the agreement, the three of you can get out of Xingyu City. Could it be that you want to go back on your words?" Xian Ling took a step forward and shouted in a deep voice, "In Xingyu Square, life and death are up to fate. Don't tell me you don't know. I don't care about your nonsense. He hurt my son. I'm going to take his life today. Could it be that your Xian clan wants to stop me?" For an outsider who has nothing to do with you? After being reprimanded by Xianling, Shuanglong's cold smile deepened. After that, he looked at them strangely and suddenly stretched out his hand. His eyes narrowed as if he was sensing something. Little brother Yun was invited by our Xian clan. Today, I have to interfere. Otherwise, how can our Xian clan establish itself in Xingyu City in the future? Seeing Shuanglong's actions, Xianling furrowed his brows and said resolutely. His voice was still indifferent, but there was a sense of majesty. Putting aside the pros and cons of starting a war with the Shuang clan, the Xian clan had to do so no matter what. If the Xian clan didn't interfere at this time, their reputation would be completely reversed. How good they were before would be how bad they were now. They wouldn't be able to establish themselves in Xingyu City. Even if they obtained the hegemony of the entire city, it would be useless. Therefore, he didn't hesitate in saying this. Hearing this, Shuanglong sneered but didn't say anything. He slowly stretched out his arm with his palm, facing the center of the square. He didn't say a word, causing everyone to be confused. They didn't know what he was doing. Xianling, on the other hand, was secretly alert. He took a few steps back and protected Yin Nuoxing behind him. Puffed. The square was silent for a moment. Yin Nuoxing suddenly laughed. He held his stomach and laughed until his entire body was trembling. His laughter made everyone even more confused. After a while, he stopped laughing. With a wave of his hand, a light flashed, and a 7-foot-long trident surrounded by water elements appeared in his hand. He then held it in the air and smiled evilly at the astonished Shuanglong. "Old man, are you looking for this?" "You." Hearing Yin Nuoxing's laughter, Shuanglong saw the extremely familiar trident. His expression changed drastically. How did the Shuang clan's treasure weapon end up in his hands? Wasn't it buried under the square? "This is the Shuang clan's trident? How did it end up in your hands?" Xianling was also confused. The Xian clan also had a treasure weapon, but it was usually guarded strictly. They wouldn't take it out for normal situations. How did the Shuang clan's treasure get taken out? How should I put it? One day, when I was taking a walk in a certain square, I accidentally smashed a hole in the floor. Then I accidentally saw this beautiful trident. So I accidentally dug it out and took it with me. Then I continued to take a walk. What's going on? A demon-level weapon was actually dug out. Yin Nuoxing scratched her head and pretended to be stupid with a smile. Every time she said, accidentally, her tone would be more serious. It was obvious that she was pointing at something. When everyone heard Yin Nuoxing's words, they were stunned for a moment. After thinking for a while, they all turned to look at Shuanglong, whose face was green and red. "Impudent brat, you stole something from the Shuang clan. Now that you've been caught red-handed, aren't you going to be arrested?" The murmurs and gazes from all around made Shuanglong's expression change constantly. In the end, he stomped his feet in anger and shouted angrily. Now that his deeds were exposed, he wouldn't admit it even if he was beaten to death. "Shuanglong, you actually..." Xianling thought for a while and thought of his destination. A demon-level weapon had the effect of amplifying the elements. It could increase the combat power of the wielder by a lot. From what Yin Nuoxing said, it seemed to have been dug out from Xingyu Square. Its purpose was self-evident. However, before he could finish speaking, an extremely angry voice came from behind him. The anger in the voice shocked him. "Old bastard, if you have the guts, then come at me. Again. Say, again, again. You bastard. You old bastard." Yin Nuoxing's eyes were red. He hated it when people slandered him, especially when it was something that didn't sound good. Shuanglong was almost choked to death by Yin Nuoxing's old bastard. His eyebrows twitched as he felt his anger. He couldn't help but sneer and say, "I can say it as many times as I want. For the sake of the Xian clan's patriarch, return the trident, and I'll let you die a quick death." Yin Nuoxing clenched his fists so tightly that they made cracking sounds. He ground his teeth so hard that they made cracking sounds. The anger in his eyes was about to burst out at any time. It was as if it was going to turn into a blazing hellfire and burn Shuanglong to ashes. "Little star, calm down. That old bastard is obviously trying to anger you. Calm down. Just as he was about to go berserk, Zia's voice suddenly rang out in his heart. The gentle sound of a wind chime continuously calmed his violent emotions. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Yin Nuashing nodded when he heard this. He forcefully twisted his neck and took 2 deep breaths. He tried his best to suppress the violent emotions in his heart. After a moment, his faint purple eyes calmed down once again. He looked at Shuang Long with a smile and waved the trident in his hand. He grinned and said, "What? You really want it, don't you?" Xian Ling, who was in front of him, couldn't help but nod when he saw that Yin Nuashing had restrained his emotions so quickly. Regardless of his strength, his ability to control his emotions was worthy of praise. This would allow him to go further on his path in the future. Shuang Long couldn't help but sneer when he heard this. His hands curled slightly like claws. "Then I'll return it to you." Yin Nuashing nodded. He raised his hand and threw the trident at Shuang Long under the astonished gazes of the crowd. Shuang Long was stunned when he saw that Yin Nuashing had really thrown the trident at him. Soon after, he laughed sinisterly. He stomped his foot on the ground, and his body turned into a shadow as he charged towards the trident. He had made up his mind to retrieve the trident and kill Yin Nuashing no matter what. Buzz! Just as Shuang Long's hand was about to touch the trident, a soft hum suddenly rang out. Then, a ray of silver light slashed towards the trident at lightning speed. It was so fast that he couldn't react in time. Slash! Yin Nuashing roared. He raised the heavenly halberd high above his head. The light element surged, and he instantly appeared behind the trident. He held the heavenly halberd and slashed it down fiercely. Clang! The 2 weapons clashed with a loud bang. The unparalleled sound wave was like the roar of a furious dragon. It turned into a rolling shockwave that spread outwards. Shuang Long, who was close by, was the first to be hit. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body flew backwards like a cannonball. Then, the trident broke with a loud sound. Clang! Chapter 204. Since you want it, I'll return it to you. Yin Nuashing laughed sinisterly. He grabbed 2 broken trident fragments and threw them fiercely at Shuang Long. The 2 fragments shot out and made a series of sonic booms. They quickly stabbed toward Shuang Long, who had just stabilized his body. Shuang Long's eyes turned blood red when he saw the 2 blue fragments flying towards him. He let out a low roar from his throat. Both his palms were covered in a dense blue water element. He waved his hands continuously and neutralized the force of the 2 fragments. After the force was neutralized, the speed of the 2 fragments slowed down. In the end, they floated to Shuang Long's side and were caught by him. He looked at Yin Nuashing with an extremely gloomy expression. His eyes were filled with unconcealable rage. Everyone stared blankly at the broken trident. Everyone's eyes widened. That was a demon-grade weapon. How could it be broken so easily? Even the members of the Xian clan looked at the trident with a pained expression. As a power of the same level, they were even more aware of the benefits that a demonic-grade weapon could bring. It could be said that the status of the 2 clans had only been established after they had obtained this weapon. Strength was the only guarantee. The trident that symbolized the Shuang family's status was broken so easily by Yin Nuashing. It could be said that the Shuang family's status had collapsed by half. At that time, the Xian family wouldn't even need to do anything. Someone else would be impatient and take the first step. This move was equivalent to cutting off the Shuang family's greatest fighting power. But it's fine if you don't want to give it to me. You can keep it for yourself. How could it be broken just like that? What a waste. And it's a demon-grade weapon. What did you use to break it? I didn't see it clearly just now. Can you show it to us? However, to Yin Nuashing, who had more than a dozen godly weapons, even if a demon-grade weapon fell to the ground, he would probably be too lazy to keep it. Good lad. Shuang Long's hand that was holding the fragments couldn't stop trembling. His eyes were red and he was panting like a bull. It made people worry that he would go berserk in the next second. You killed my Shuang family. You destroyed my weapon. As a Shuang family patriarch, I will pull out your tendons and pull out your bones. We won't rest until we're dead." Shuanglong's tyrannical voice reverberated throughout the square, causing it to fall silent. The atmosphere seemed to have frozen at this moment. However, it only lasted for a moment before it was broken by a clear murmur. "What noisy old man. He only knows how to blabber and not do anything." Ming glanced at the enraged Shuanglong and grumbled. He was displeased with the way Shuanglong roared at the slightest thing. "You don't have to be so aggressive. You won't be able to do anything today." Xianling didn't care about Shuanglong's roar and sneered. After losing the demon-grade weapon, the Shuang family's strength and status would take a hit. At this moment, they were no longer a threat to the Xian family. The Xian family didn't have to be afraid of the Shuang family anymore. If they wanted to, they could even wipe out the Shuang family completely. Shuanglong's body trembled violently, as if he wanted to say something. However, he kept his mouth shut unwillingly. No matter how stubborn he was, it was just as Xianling had said. He couldn't make a move today. Even if he did, it wouldn't be good for him. It would be fine if he chose to go out on his own. However, if he was thrown out, he would lose a lot of face. Moreover, he had already used up all the face he had left today. If he continued to pester endlessly, his reputation would be ruined. Of course, it would be very bad. "All right, stop talking." Just as the two families were arguing, the man in blue slowly stood up and walked to the middle of the two families. He frowned. He had been trying to heal Shuangya's injuries, but the divine flame in Shuangya's body was too overbearing. He didn't know how much effort it took for him to extinguish it with the water element. Although the fire was extinguished, the injury was probably irreversible. "I'm not interested in the grudges between your two families. However, boy, you injure my water god temple's people. I want an explanation." The man in blue looked at Yun Nuoxing calmly. His tone was calm, and he didn't take advantage of his seniority or be aggressive. It was as if he was talking about something normal. Seeing that the man suddenly changed the topic to him, Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. After a while, he said gloomily, "Actually, I didn't intend to kill him. As for the broken meridians, I think it was because the flame was too powerful and I couldn't fully control it." After all, Yin Nuoxing had just obtained the purple night flame not long ago. He didn't know much about its power. It was already very good that he could control it so that it didn't burn people to death. Moreover, he had merged the two flames a while ago. Although he was still in a state of affinity, it was harder to control. If he made a mistake, it was inevitable that something would happen. Hearing Yin Nuoxing's answer and seeing his clear eyes, the man in blue thought for a while and then nodded lightly. It was indeed difficult to control such a violent thing like the divine flame. Even if it was refined into one's body without a long time to familiarize with it, it would be difficult for a god to completely control it, not to mention that he had just reached the immortal level. After thinking for a while, the man in blue looked at Shuanglong and said lightly, "I accidentally used too much force. I will bring Shuangya back to the Water God Temple. According to the agreement, the Shuang family has lost. From now on, along with the other two families, their positions and everything will be handed over to the Xian family. There can't be any delay. Silence. Even death wouldn't be this quiet." Xinyu Square was so quiet that it was frightening. Even the subtle sounds of ants crawling could be heard clearly. Hua. Then, the crowd went into an uproar. They originally thought that Shuangya, as a disciple of the Water God Temple, would speak or act in favor of the Shuang family. But now, it seemed that he didn't care at all. Yin Nuoxing was already prepared to take out the token that Jin Wang gave him. However, the man in blue's words stunned him, as expected of someone from the Water God Temple. Hearing this answer, Yin Nuoxing was slightly surprised. He smiled. Whether it was Jin Wang or the Water God King, they gave him the feeling that they were selfless and righteous people. During the disasters in Yin City, there were several God Kings who were busy, whether it was evacuating the people or resisting the enemy. Speaking of which, back in Constellation City, it was also Jin Wang who evacuated the people of Constellation City. Suddenly recalling the scene in Constellation City, Yun Nuoxing tilted his head. He seemed to have heard people praising the 9 god temples as protectors. Hearing this answer, the people from the Xian family and Shuang family were stunned for a long time. Their expressions changed. The former was happy, while the latter was confused and dispirited. However, even if they had such an outcome, they didn't dare to implicate the water god temple. Putting aside the bet, they couldn't afford to offend the water god temple. Just like how the Shuang family was an unreachable power in the eyes of ordinary people, the water god temple was a colossus that they couldn't afford to offend. If they really wanted to exterminate the Shuang family, it would only take a glance. The Xian clan would like to thank this elder. Xianling reacted very quickly. He immediately cupped his fist and bowed. They couldn't afford to offend the water god temple either. Today's result was quite unexpected. With the Shuang family's temperament, even if they were cursed by the entire city, they might not really get out of Constellation City like this. However, with this water god temple man's words, they had no choice but to get out. Hearing this, the blue-clothed man shook his head and said indifferently, "I'm just doing my job impartially." Although Shuang Long was full of anger, he had no choice but to suppress it at this moment. He still had to smile apologetically as he glared at Yin Nuoxing with resentment. After a moment, he waved his hand and led everyone out of the square. His appearance was quite dejected. Seeing that the Shuang family had left, the blue-clothed man looked at Yin Nuoxing and said faintly, "Young man, control yourself. In the future, before you act, you should be clear about your own strength to avoid accidentally injuring others. Sooner or later, it will lead to a disaster." "Yes." Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. At this moment, other than smiling bitterly, he really couldn't show any other emotions. Seeing that Yin Nuoxing nodded, the man also nodded lightly. With a wave of his hand, the rich water element turned into a water ball that wrapped around the unconscious Shuangya. Along with the man's figure, they disappeared from square. Phew! Seeing that the man had left, Xianling heaved a sigh of relief. Although the former didn't reveal a trace of his aura, the faint pressure that seeped out almost crushed them. After heaving a sigh of relief, Xianling cupped his fist solemnly towards Yin Nuoxing and said in a deep voice, "This time, many thanks to little brother Yun's help. I represent the Xian family here to thank you. Your kindness will be engraved in the Xian family's heart." Behind Xianling, the Xian family's people also cupped their fists and bowed towards Yin Nuoxing in unison. On the side, Xianming and Xianling also bowed towards Yin Nuoxing and cupped their fists. Seeing that the Xian family's people were bowing in such a grand manner, Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly and said, "I think I just came up and snapped my fingers. Is there a need to do this?" Looking at the Xian family's high platform, Yin Nuoxing was also a little surprised when he didn't see the dark purple figure. Although he didn't show it, he sighed in his heart. Moreover, what he didn't know was that he actually felt a little disappointed in his heart. Shaking his head, Yin Nuoxing sighed and said with a smile, "If it wasn't for big brother Xian Fu saving me, I would probably have reported to the king of hell by now. Don't be like this. The one who should be thanking is me." After saying that, he cupped his fist towards Xian Fu. "Instead of thanking each other, why don't we invite Mr. Yun back to the Xian family to rest for a while?" Xianming couldn't help but smile when he saw that both sides were thanking each other. Hearing that, Yin Nuoxing thought for a while before nodding his head. Because of the matter in his sea of consciousness, there was a knot in his heart, and he couldn't sleep well. Although he said that it was fine, his mind was filled with nonsense all day long. Moreover, he wanted to see a certain person's figure when he entered the Xian family's residence. When he heard the voice earlier, he only glanced at it and didn't take a closer look. Seeing that Yin Nuoxing nodded his head, Xianling couldn't help but smile. He also wanted to befriend such a young immortal rank expert. If he could befriend such a young immortal rank expert, it would be extremely beneficial for the Xian family. "Clan leader Xian, I would like to ask you something. Do you have time?" In the spacious courtyard of the Xian family, Yin Nuoxing and Xianling sat together. Yin Nuoxing turned his head and asked, "Oh, what is it? If I know, I won't hide it." Hearing that, Xianling laughed softly. His tone was neither fast nor slow. It seemed that he was used to this kind of tone. Yun Nuashing paused and hesitated for a moment before asking, "Is there a girl called Xian in the Xian family?" He had been in the Xian family residence for 2 or 3 hours. He had asked Xian Fu to bring him around the Xian family residence on the pretext of taking a stroll. He had visited all the deserted and popular places, but he hadn't seen that dark purple figure. He couldn't help but feel impatient, so he decided to ask directly. However, he felt that if he asked as if they didn't know each other, he really didn't know Xianxian. He only knew her name. As for what kind of person she was, he didn't know her at all. Furthermore, she didn't know his name either. "What's wrong with my daughter?" Hearing Yun Nuashing mention Xian's name, Xianling's eyelids couldn't help but twitch. He laughed and said somewhat unnaturally. Hearing Xianling's reply, ecstasy surged in Yun Nuashing's heart. Some excitement that could not be detected flashed across his face. Then, before he could be seen through, he hurriedly dispersed. Tilting his head, he took out the jade pendant that he had picked up that day from his pendant and gently placed it on the table. Then, he gave an explanation. However, he did not tell the whole story. He only said that the two of them had glanced at each other from afar. Then Yin suddenly ran away, and he picked up the jade pendant. This is indeed her jade pendant. It is also a symbol of the Xian family status. Receiving the jade pendant from Yun Nuashing, Xianling looked at it in his hand and nodded. However, he didn't keep it. Instead, he returned it to Yun Nuashing and smiled. "I'll have to trouble Brother Yun to return this jade pendant to her for me." Hearing this, Yun Nuashing widened his eyes and looked at Xianling strangely. From that pair of calm eyes, he seemed to read some self-blame. "I don't have the face to see that child. I'm afraid that she doesn't want to see me either." Xianling sighed and said this with a gloomy expression. He didn't say anything else. This made Yun Nuashing very confused. He didn't know what had happened between the father and daughter. "My daughter is in the sea of flowers that I planted in the north of the Xian residence." After hesitating for a moment, Yun Nuashing reached out and took the jade pendant. He raised his head and glanced at Yun Nuashing. He smiled and said, "Your guess might not be accurate. How can you know what others are thinking? Even if you're father and daughter, you still have to communicate with each other." With that, Yun Nuashing shrugged his shoulders and put the jade pendant back into the pendant. He then slowly walked out of the courtyard, leaving Xianling, who had been frozen by his words, to be left alone in silence. Chapter 205. Deep in the night, the purple moonlight pierced through the darkness and slowly drove away the darkness. Two basins slowly climbed up from the horizon, one in front and one behind, occupying a part of the sky and sprinkling down the cold moonlight. On the roof of the Xian residence, Yun Nuashing was lying on the wall, as usual, looking up at the starry sky. His expression was like that of a child who had found a toy, innocent and unaffected. This was the first time he had seen the starry sky after coming to the Divine Prefecture. It seemed no different from the starry sky in the Sourcepeak domain. It was still as bright and beautiful as before. A white ribbon stretched across the entire night sky, with yellowish-brown light dotting the edges. The starry sky in the Divine Prefecture and the Sourcepeak domain doesn't seem to be any different. I thought I would be able to see a brand new starry sky. Yun Nuashing sighed to himself. For someone like him who yearned for the starry sky, finding a place to lie down every night and quietly gaze at the starry sky was already very satisfying. If you look closely, there will be some differences. The Sourcepeak domain and the Divine Prefecture are separated by a great distance, so the starry sky you see will be somewhat different. If you look closely, you will be able to tell, Ziyi murmured softly. His voice was filled with laziness, as if he was about to fall asleep. Yun Nuashing rolled his eyes and muttered, "You can't even sleep peacefully." He turned his head and looked at the other side of the starry sky. A huge ball of bright light was quietly suspended in the starry sky like a sun. However, this sun was countless times larger than the one during the day, almost occupying the entire sky. The dazzling light expelled the darkness of the night. Even without a light, one could still see clearly, and the room would not be too dark. There were two galaxies. One was at one end of the realm of the gods, and the other was at the other end. They were separated by the realm of the gods, and the distance between them was unknown. No matter how many times I see it, it's still so beautiful. Yin Nuoxing looked at the balls of light on both sides of him as he lay on the ground and smiled knowingly. In his arms, Ming was lying on his chest, sleeping peacefully. From time to time, she would make one or two sleep-talking sounds as if she was dreaming of something, and her head was still not completely resting. He patted Ming's head with his palm, and a gentle soul force surged into her mind. It emitted a gentle light and calmed down the functions that refused to shut down. Whoosh! With one hand on the cold floor, he slowly sat up. He walked to the wall and looked down. When he saw the room that was still lit up, he sighed softly. That was Xian Xian's room. It was a small courtyard in the Xian Manor, facing the south. It was a very good location, but it was a little out of the way. The entire northern side had been turned into a garden, and the flowers were blooming brightly. Colorful flowers were blooming under the starry night sky. A light breeze blew, and the fragrance of the flowers swayed. In the northern side, only this room stood there alone, enduring the wind and rain alone. Recalling what Xianling had said to him in the afternoon, he could vaguely guess that something must have happened to Xian Xian. But judging from the girl's appearance, it didn't seem like she was mentally ill. Know a person's face, but not his heart. Yin Nuoxing muttered. Moreover, the two of them didn't know each other. It could only be said that they had inadvertently looked at each other. It was quiet all around. The bright lights flickered in the room, and the sea of flowers swayed with a pleasant fragrance, making rustling sounds. Soul stabilizing flower, spirit calming grass, heart intoxicating flower. These are all medicinal herbs that can calm the soul and calm the mind. There are so many of them here. Could it be that she is very anxious? But it doesn't seem like it. After taking a deep whiff of the floral fragrance, Yin Nuoxing immediately identified the source of these few fragrances. Immediately, he was a little confused. The medicinal pills that were refined from these medicinal herbs all had the effect of calming the mind and soothing the soul. There were so many of them here. The first impression that Yin Nuoxing got was that the person living here should be very irritable and temperamental. After pondering for a while, Yin Nuoxing didn't have any clues. He didn't make any useless guesses. He took out a thick quilt from his pendant, wrapped Ming in it, and gently placed him on the ground. Then, he moved and floated down from the roof. He stood in front of the door of the small courtyard, and only walked in after making sure that there was nothing wrong. I really want to pick a few flowers and leave. Yin Nuoxing looked back at the sea of flowers, and only felt that his fingers couldn't hold back anymore. All right, you're not an alchemist, and you don't know how to refine pills. It's useless to pick them. Go do what you need to do. Purple Night's lazy yawn sounded in his mind, and Yin Nuoxing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He could only shake his head and sigh. When he walked to the door, he could faintly see a beautiful figure through the thin paper on the door. She was standing in front of the table, and her lily-white hand was gently twirling a brush. She slowly danced on the table, as if she was writing something. Unfortunately, they were too far away, and Yin Nuoxing couldn't see clearly. The evil spirit's consciousness started to work. Oh my God, what am I doing? I'll leave as soon as I return the jade pendant. Suddenly, Yin Nuoxing realized what he was doing. He quickly closed his eyes, and his face suddenly became hot. He was sneaking around like he was peeping. Phew! Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and counted silently. 3, 2, 1, 9.9, 8.8. In the end, as he counted, his confidence became lower and lower. His fingers were about to touch the door, but they kept trembling, and he couldn't bring himself to do it. What the F***CK? He roared in his heart. He fiercely gritted his teeth, bent his fingers slightly, and, gently, he knocked a few times. Knock, knock, knock. The sudden knocking on the door seemed to have frightened the girl in the room. Yin Nuoxing clearly saw the brush in her hand shake, and then she frantically tidied up the table. She hurriedly rolled up something and threw it to the side, blocking it with a book. Only then did her panicked voice drift out. "Oh, who is it?" Hearing this melodious sound that was as beautiful as music, the indescribable emotion that had persisted for 3 days in Yun Nuoxing's heart finally dissipated. At this moment, it was as if he had obtained an unprecedented satisfaction. He was silent for a long time before he stammered, "That, Miss Xianzian? It's you." Hearing his voice, Xianzian was stunned for a moment. She suddenly stood still and stared blankly at the door, as if hesitating whether to open it or not. "Zai, what do we do in this situation? What do we do? What do we do? What do we do?" Seeing that Xianzian didn't move, Yun Nuoxing was a little anxious. He hurriedly roared in his heart and called for Zai's help. "She'll open the door. Don't worry, don't yell and scream. I'm sleeping comfortably." A moment later, Zai's resentful voice sounded in Yun Nuoxing's heart. This made Yun Nuoxing heave a sigh of relief. He was worried that he would be left hanging at the door and be rejected. Creak! Sure enough, 2 seconds after Zai spoke, the door in front of him quietly opened. Then, Xianzian, dressed in a white nightgown, slowly appeared behind the door. She even had a purple robe draped over her. It looked a little messy, as if she'd put it on at the last minute. The girl's head was very low. She didn't raise her head to look at Yun Nuoxing. She kept staring at the floor. Her snow-white face was tinged with a little rosy, and she looked very cute. "You, what's the matter?" Sensing Yun Nuoxing's gaze, Xianzian's face turned even redder as she spoke in a fluster. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing was stunned. Only then did he realize that his gaze seemed to be a little too indulgent. He immediately laughed dryly and quickly shifted his gaze away. The pendant flashed with some light. He took out the good-quality jade pendant and waved it in front of her a few times. He said, "This, you dropped it." Seeing this incomparably familiar jade pendant, Xianzian was stunned for a moment. Her slender hand reflexively touched the belt of her purple dress. When she didn't feel that familiar thing, her pretty face instantly turned red. Mei Mao quietly swept her gaze across Yun Nuoxing's smiling face. After a while, she slowly took the jade pendant from his hand. Then, she softly thanked him. Thank you." Seeing this, Yun Nuoxing smiled slightly. Since the pendant had been returned to its rightful owner, it wasn't appropriate for him to stay any longer. In any case, he had already achieved his goal. Seeing Xianzian here was enough. Waving his hand, Yun Nuoxing laughed. He turned around and was about to leave when he felt the corner of his shirt being gently tugged. He immediately froze, and his heart inexplicably skipped 3 beats. He stiffly turned around and saw Xianzian pinching the corner of his shirt with 2 slender fingers. He couldn't help but laugh dryly. "What's the matter?" Xianzian opened her small mouth as if she was very nervous. After a long time, she stuttered. I still don't know your name." Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing's face turned a little awkward. He really didn't introduce himself. But in this situation, how could he introduce himself? It was already very difficult to speak calmly. She was simply in a hurry to leave. This made him feel a little helpless. He had never faced such a difficult person before. "Yun Nuoxing. My name is Yun Nuoxing." Yun as in white clouds, Nuo as in promise, and Xing as in stars. After regaining his senses, Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath. The trace of nervousness in his heart disappeared, and he smiled knowingly. Wait a minute." Hearing this, the girl nodded slightly and said in a small voice. Then, she hurriedly rushed back to the side of the table and hurriedly took out a small knife and a jade pendant from the drawer. The jade pendant looked exactly the same as the one she was wearing. She lightly touched the jade pendant with the small knife and calmly began to draw on it. Seeing what she was doing at the table, Yun Nuoxing couldn't enter her boudoir to watch. He could only stand quietly outside the door and look at the room. The room wasn't very big. It was more than 10 meters long and wide. The layout was also very simple. On the bed, there was a neatly folded quilt, a table with the 4 treasures of the study, and a dressing table with only a mirror. There were many ink paintings hanging on the wall. They seemed to be the girl's work, and they looked quite artistic. Okay. When Yun Nuoxing was looking at the room, Xian Zian's nervous voice pulled him back to reality. Then, he calmed himself down and looked at her. He didn't know when she had walked to his side. At this moment, she was holding her hands horizontally and facing him. A jade pendant lay, quietly, on her flawless jade palms. On the jade pendant, a red string wound around it. A beautiful Yun character was carved on it. This seemed to be what she had just carved. With a slight smile, Yun Nuoxing solemnly took the jade pendant and turned it over. He saw his name engraved on the back of the jade pendant. When he saw these two words, Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. He smiled and shook his head. In front of the girl, he walked around the windbreaker and tied the jade pendant to the black clothes underneath. TSK, TSK. You've already left a love token. Little star, seize this opportunity. Seeing Yun Nuoxing take the jade pendant, Zai suddenly laughed in his heart. The sudden voice made Yun Nuoxing tremble. Then he laughed bitterly. What the hell was a love token? The two of them barely knew each other. How could they talk about a love token? It's getting late. You should rest early. After doing this, Yun Nuoxing smiled and said, Okay. Xian Zian nodded gently. He raised his head and looked straight into Yun Nuoxing's eyes. The moment their eyes met, Yun Nuoxing's heart skipped a beat. It was as if he had returned to 3 days ago when they first met in the peach blossom forest. At that time, his beating heart seemed to have felt the same way. It was filled with joy and a faint, inexplicable feeling. The two of them stared at each other for a long time. Finally, Yun Nuoxing couldn't take it anymore and hurriedly turned his gaze away. He couldn't look at others directly for too long. Yun Nuoxing sighed and looked at the two moons that had risen to the sky. He waved at her, then jumped back and landed lightly in the brilliant sea of blooming flowers. Then he waved at Xian Zian, who was still standing in front of the door in the distance, then turned around and walked out. After watching Yun Nuoxing leave until he disappeared from her sight, the girl's restless heart finally returned to normal. Her lily-white hand touched her chest, and she sighed inexplicably. Then, she turned around and walked into the room. She closed the door behind her and gently walked over to the table. She pushed the pile of books to one side, then took out the rice paper that she had hurriedly rolled up and gently unfolded it. Under the white rice paper, there was a portrait of a person. As the ink was rolled up before it dried, more than half of the rice paper was stained with black spots. However, one could still see the person in the portrait clearly. It was a young man with a smile that was as warm as the spring breeze on his face. However, there was a hint of unruly pride, but it was also heartwarming. And this portrait was none other than the person who had just left. Yun Nuoxing. If he saw this portrait, he would definitely fall into the sea of flowers and faint sigh. The girl patted her plump chest and stared blankly at the portrait for a long time. Then, she sighed softly and carefully rolled it up again. She placed it beside the pile of books, then turned around and walked to the bed. She blew out the light and gently laid down on the bed. On the roof in the distance, Yun Nuoxing also let out a long sigh when he saw the light in the room gradually dim. He touched the jade pendant on his black robe and suddenly smiled. He hugged Ming, turned around, flung his windbreaker, and walked towards the door on the top floor. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.